All right, we are live on YouTube waiting for the show to start, but I'd figure I'd let people start trickling in, and we will have people joining us in a second. Let's shut down the audio on mine. There we go. Just make sure everything is looking good. And there we go. So we are just waiting for Blog Talk ready to launch. About a minute and a half left. So if you are, I just only have one viewer so far. More will trickle in, I suppose, as Hal Sparks show ends. But just want to make sure that I was connected, that my signal looked good, and my connection to YouTube was good.
1 minute
the Blog
until
Talk Radio
showtime.
Show starts. Make sure everything, because I think I had to put the volume up a little higher last time for Hal, just to make sure everybody can hear it. Still working on my OBS settings, so we'll see.
It is what it is.
Thank you, Donald. Oh, we got 5 already. Hey. Hello, Organic West. How's it going? Thank you for joining. We are just 30 seconds away from the official start of the show, but I figured I'd get this up and running as we as ready to go. If you want to share the show, Hal should be on at about bottom half of the hour. Just share the link to the show, bring everybody in. Sparklers Assemble, as I've called this show. It's weird. The YouTube settings are different. One set of
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Using gerrymandering, voter suppression, and other nefarious tactics, the Republican Party has manipulated our electoral system to maintain as much control as possible despite being a party in the minority. Liberal Dan Radio seeks to change that, and I need your help in doing so. Liberal Dan Radio has partnered with Levelfield to help us use tools that are typically only available to big money donors. When you go to stopthecoup.liberaldan.com and make your contribution, it will encourage other voters to reach out to their legislators to pass legislation to stop gerrymandering and voter suppression, and target elected officials who refuse to protect the vote. Every eligible voter should be able to cast a ballot, and that ballot should have the same power as everyone else. I can't do this alone. I need your help. So please go to stopthecoup.liberaldan.com and make your contribution today. That's stopthecoup.liberaldan.com. stopthecoup.liberaldan.com. Political advertising paid for by Levelfield. Contributions are not tax deductible as charitable contributions.
That's right. This is your host, Dan Zimmerman, coming at you from New Orleans, Louisiana. To join the conversation is area code 914-803-4131. That is 914-803-4131. You could also join us in either of the chat rooms. The most popular one is going to be probably the YouTube one, youtube.com/liberaldanradio, or if you're listening on Blog Talk Radio, you could also, excuse me, join us in that chat room as well, blogtalkradio.com/liberaldan. And if you happen to be listening after the live broadcast, you could always leave your comments, questions, concerns, etc. over on the show thread at liberaldan.com, at facebook.com/liberaldan, at liberaldanradio on Twitter. Bottom half of the hour, last show of the month, bottom half of the hour so far for the last 4 months has been the one and only Hal Sparks, and he'll be on in about 27 minutes or so. But until then, you got some housekeeping to do with my normal show and bits and stuff like that. So we're going to get those done in the first half hour before Hal gets on, and then it'll be a fun chat with Hal for the rest of the show, as long as he can stay on, or 3 hours, whichever one's shorter, I guess. So yes, Marsha, thank you very much. Don't forget to smash that like button. If you want to support the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. If you can do so, you could also go to support the show, patreon.com/liberaldan or patreon.liberaldan.com. Either one will get you there. Lots of different levels to support the show at. But I know, again, it's a tough time, still coming out the pandemic, and I know a lot of people can't afford to put that much money out there. So subscribing to the show is the best. Sharing videos, watch the channel, see if there's anything else that you like other than the shows that I do, and share those out. And that's the best way that I'm going to grow the audience, and that's the best way to support the channel. So let's see. The beginning of you heard the Stop the Coup ad, stopthecoup.liberaldan.com. It's something. There's a company called Levelfield, and they've worked with other liberal-leaning or Democratic or leftist organizations to try and enable people on the left to have, who might be smaller, to be able to utilize the power of like PACs and super PACs or whatever legal entity you would do to argue for an issue. And Levelfield's trying to make it so that the small guys have the tools that the big guys have done. I haven't done that much with it. I haven't had much traction with it, but if you just check out stopthecoup.liberaldan.com as well, just going to the site might be enough to kind of, give us some traction and just share that as well. I did a couple of videos on gerrymandering and stopping the coup. There's a 4-part series that I have so far about the GOP coup, and then there's other videos I've done about gerrymandering, showing how the Republican Party is just so much worse at gerrymandering than the Democratic Party when it comes to the amount of people that they are disenfranchising with the drawing of their boundaries. Now, I'm not going to say that the Democrats don't do it. I'm from Maryland originally, and Maryland is terrible with gerrymandering. But overall, the Republicans have much more say than they should. Why? Because they've gerrymandered a lot. So we got, let's see. Just stop the coup.liberaldan.com. Share that as well if you can. If you like what you see over there and think it should get traction, share that as well. Anyway, so I do want to I labeled the show Sparklers Assembled because I think my shows have gotten much better since I've had more and more sparklers coming over here. Maybe people can be, as Aaron said, the Liberal Dan, the cunning linguists. I haven't decided what all, the shirts, the first round of shirts that I made for my OGs, say Master Debater on it. I might have some shirts that say Cunning Linguist on it, one of the two. I need to think of a cool nickname. I don't have like Hal Sparks, Sparklers. It's very easy to get there. There's no real good puns with Zimmerman. So either I got to change my last name or I got to come up with something else creative as well. And I tend to be pretty creative about stuff, but we'll see. So one of the things I want to talk about before, I had a AC went out in my house, and it's New Orleans. It's hot, and it's May. It's getting to the 80s, 90s, and the AC wasn't totally out. It turned out it was just the circuit board that controlled whether or not the fan turned off or on. So if we turned on the fan automatically, not auto, but just on full blowing 24/7, it worked. But that just burns energy. It keeps running the fan even if the outside unit's not on. So we got somebody to fix it. And have you ever had a person that you really like you really, really like the person who does work on your house, and you don't want to lose them, you don't want to, or just anything in general. Like, for example, my doctor, my general practitioner, today was my last visit with my general practitioner, and he's going to France, and so it's kind of hard to do medicine from France. I mean, our last one was actually telehealth, so I guess he could do telehealth from France, I don't know, but that one he'd have to have weird sleep hours then. But it's very disappointing that I now have to find a new doctor that I'm going to like, because this doctor was perfect for me and my family. But so with the AC guy, he comes out, he does things, he doesn't try and nickel and dime me. He'll try and fix it for as cheap as you can. He comes out on weekends. He's great when it comes to all that. And somebody said the Zimmerets or the Zimmerons, Shimmering Zimmerman, maybe. I mean, look, think of clever names in the chat. If someone finds it, I'll finds a good nickname, I'll definitely use that. I'll give you credit too. Anyway, so let's see. We live in We live in Washington. We don't have AC here. Don't need it too cold. Sometimes I wish that, but my wife can't handle the cold. But anyway, so he orders the circuit board. He gets it installed. It's all done. It's all fixed. Yes. And then he starts talking. And I live in Louisiana, and I live in New Orleans. New Orleans is a very liberal area. Very liberal. I mean, leftist. We elected a leftist sheriff to run over the jail and run over the sheriff's department. For some weird reason, New Orleans has a sheriff's department and a police department. I don't know why. It doesn't make sense to me, but, what is it, Donald?
It is what it is.
Thank you, Donald. And so, but around New Orleans are lots of conservatives. A lot of conservatives. And apparently this guy is. And not only is he a conservative, this guy is and he's new to it. Like, he's new to the whole idea of, like, sovereign citizens. He's like, I just found out that the U.S. government is technically bankrupt, and Donald Trump signed some legislation or whatever, and it should take effect sometime soon. And when he does so, I can go name myself a sovereign citizen, and I'll be able to, no longer have to pay taxes to the government again. I'm trying to remember everything that he said, like, because that's done under common law, and the United States is under the admiralty law, and I'm just like, my head is slowly exploding. Like, I can't believe he's sitting here and telling me about this crap. And then he starts going into the whole, I've started taking ivermectin, and ivermectin because everybody has these parasites, and I know this friend, and he actually took the horse paste, and it's so much, he feels so much better now that his parasites are gone. I'm like, well, I guess he's feeling good if the parasites are gone. Why does your friend have so many parasites that he needs to take horse to? And he literally took the paste. And I'm like, and I didn't want to say, like, normally I'm very outspoken. Anybody else, I might have been like, maybe you should talk to a legit doctor about that, because, you don't want to go to a horse supply store and get, heartworm pills for yourself and take them, because that's not going to be good. But I didn't want to scare away the guy that does our AC work so good. Oh, I'm like rocking a hard place here. So it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible that I had to deal with that, and I have to wonder whether or not I want to continue to pay the guy. Well, I mean, I paid him for this work that is done, but do I want to find somebody new? Because if I find somebody new, then I need to, do I trust him? Do I trust this person? Is this person going to be reliable? But do I really want to be giving money to a crazy wackadoo like that? Speaking of crazy whack-to-do's, let's see. 67% of ivermectin users are now suffering from bowel and bladder incontinence. True story. I mean, they're all full of shit. So, and Organic West, I had a hard time. I wanted to set him straight. I did kind of mention something. I was like, if you have a doctor and your doctor really thinks that you should take ivermectin, I'm not going to criticize you for you taking a medicine that your doctor prescribes. But then he was like, oh no, my friend took the stuff from the animal supply store. I'm like, really? I just couldn't. See, I've used ivermectin on horses. I mean, I've looked at the HeartGuard pills, and the HeartGuard pills for when I had a dog had ivermectin in it. And I'm like, you're admitting that you have work. And Hal said previously, if you take ivermectin and you feel better, that means you had worms. That's it. You had parasites. Therefore, that's why you feel better. It did nothing for your COVID. It did nothing to prevent you from having COVID. Cheryl says, high here was 67 degrees today. Oh, I'm so jealous. That's like the perfect temperature. I would love that all year round, except I'm probably going to go swimming. That would stick, at least outdoor swimming. So, anyway, speaking of crazy people, they had... on the morning show that I listen to, which is typically in the early mornings, I listen to a conservative radio show for talk show, for show prep, and they're usually a plethora of stuff for Words of Redneck Wisdom. Usually I'm grabbing Leon from South Carolina, that caller, who sounds a lot like Ficus, by the way. But this time he had somebody calling in, and this person was calling in about from prison. He was in jail, not prison, but he was in jail. He's awaiting trial. Why is he awaiting trial? Because he's a January 6th insurrectionist. And supposedly he's being treated so poorly at this jail that he doesn't have a table to eat on and he can't see family, but somehow he's able to make phone calls to talk radio shows. Anyway, here's this week's Words of Redneck Wisdom.
And now, Words of Redneck Wisdom, brought to you by Liberal Dan Radio.
I mean, I have 12 felony counts that are alleging that I committed. I mean, they range anywhere from aiding and abetting to obstruction of Congress. It's a trumped-up charge. It's called the 1512 charge, and it's a blanket charge that comes with a 20-year maximum sentence that they've charged hundreds of Americans with just for being on the Capitol grounds that day. Like myself, I didn't even make it inside the Capitol building, and then they're saying that I allegedly, obstructed Congress. And the thing is we have a constitutional right to have a redress of our grievances. And if the people's will is to have a grievance redress, a grievance so large as we don't believe in the integrity of our election, then everything should go on pause. The politicians that we elected that inherently derive their power from the will of the people. If the will of the people, if a million people are outside Congress protesting, saying, we want a recount of the election, we want to slow this down and to make sure that everything happened legit, and the politicians just railroad us and just overstep their power and basically certify an illegal election, then obviously we're living in a tyrannical regime. We're not in the United States of America. Our constitutional right to redress our grievance is totally non-existent. And so the people just totally felt that day disenfranchised by the politicians that we elected. And we also, on top of that, as we're peacefully protesting, we were assaulted and ambushed and kettled. And Nancy Pelosi's Capitol Police Force that day was out for blood. They were not, in half the building you see these photos and videos of the police like high-fiving people and taking selfies and stuff. There's a totally other scene that went down on the West Terrace Tunnel.
And this concludes Words of Redneck Wisdom, brought to you by Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left, that's right.
And there you go. And first of all, Julie Swenson, you're absolutely correct. He goes, if he never made it inside, he probably got arrested for beating cops outside. It's very convenient because the host had asked him, what charges are you charged with? And he said, like, the obstruction of Congress and the other stuff. He never mentioned the fact that he was, also one of his charges was for assaulting a Capitol police officer. But the funniest thing about that clip is that I'm listening in my car, driving my son to school, and my son gives great commentary on the idiots that call into that radio show. He's 13 years old and he gets it already. It's wonderful. But he's sitting there and he's saying that it's a trumped up charge, that this claim of obstruction of Congress is not legitimate and he didn't do that. Then he admits to doing it. Then he admits to saying that if the government who's elected doesn't do what you want them to do, then you should be able to get out there and stop them from doing it. So he's basically saying you should be able to obstruct Congress if you don't agree. And that's basically saying what he was doing. But if the people there, if they were elected in the same election, most of them, not the senators, like a third of the senators were, but all of the House was elected in the same election that he felt was fraudulent. So how are their actions any more or less fraudulent than the ones over the presidential election if you really believe that there was a fraud there? But yeah, I mean, he's sitting there and his name is Jake Lang. Is if you want to look up all the stuff that he did, there's videos of him standing up there with a gas mask, holding a police shield that that he took from a cop, swinging a bat at a cop. So, I mean, the video evidence is there. And let's see. Lang has told the judge on Friday that his solitary confinement has taken a physical and mental toll on him and prevented him from viewing the evidence at length to help prepare his defense. Although he has an attorney, I don't know what the deal is with that. But one of the things that was lacking in the questioning of Lang on this conservative talk show, I found, was, first of all, he never asked Lang, why didn't he comply? He should have just followed police orders. If he would have followed police orders, he wouldn't have been arrested, right? I mean, that's their line when black people get assaulted and or killed by the police, is that they go, well, why didn't they comply with the police? Why didn't he follow police orders? Why did he not jump the barricade? Why didn't he stay where he was supposed to stay, outside of the area, and not go into that tunnel? I mean, maybe he wasn't in the building, but he was in the tunnel heading into the building. And furthermore, apparently supposed blue lives, there's no such thing as a blue life, but supposed blue lives magically don't matter anymore. I guess blue lives only matter when they're doing things that are bad against black folks. But when the blue lives are doing things against conservatives, oh, that's terrible. We can't support them. Then they're tyrannical. Terrible people. Terrible tyranny. It's amazing. And that might have been also Hypocrite of the Week this week. But however, in light of what's going on in Texas, I did feel, let's see, Julie Spencer, people that were arrested for simply trespassing were virtually all released on bail. If he's still in jail, he probably really did something heinous or doubled down and promised violence if released. And that's also true. One of the things that I talked about, one of my past shows was on bail reform. There was an individual who he's a bail bondsman in Texas, and he opposes a lot of the bail reform attempts that are being pushed by leftist organizations. But I welcomed him on the show to have so we could have a civil conversation about where we stand on the issues. And one of the things we talked about was recognizance bonds, where you're released on your own recognizance, and if you don't show up, that's when you have to pay money if you fail to show up. And the discussion by folks on the left who are pushing for the elimination of bail or bail reform want there to be a situation where if you are charged with a non-violent crime, that you should be able to be, especially if it's your first offense, you should be released on a recognizance bond. Trust that you'll come back. And on the show, we discussed that in Pennsylvania or Philadelphia specifically, when they did that, when they stopped giving assessing bail to low-level crimes, the rate that people showed up to court didn't change. If people weren't going to show up, they weren't going to show up. It didn't matter whether or not they had bond or not. So there's that. But this guy, he was accused of committing acts of violence. But he calls himself a political prisoner. And that's the thing that conservatives never want to do. They never want to talk about how they always want to talk about how the extreme affects treat everybody like the extreme, or the extreme like everybody. Talking about the school board situation, where there was the memo from the Justice Department that said that they were going to look into people who were threatening school boards. And this memo comes out, and all the conservatives are like, why are you going after parents? They're not going after parents. They're going after people that are using terror against school board members, people who are threatening to either dox school board members. And when I asked the conservative talk show host, do you think that these people who disagree with what's going on in school boards should be able to dox the school board members? And he's like, no, absolutely they shouldn't do that. Well, good. That's the only thing that they're doing. They're only targeting the criminals. They're not targeting everybody else, but they've got to pivot it back, just like with the whole, just like the guns thing. And we'll get to the gun thing in a second. But before Hal gets on the show, I do want to play the Hypocrite of the Week as well. So let's go. Here's this week's Hypocrite of the Week.
This week's Hypocrite of the Week is the NRA, who called for an end to gun-free zones after the Jacksonville, Florida shooting. The NRA is not allowing any guns at its convention being held in Texas on Friday. But remember, the NRA is not a gun rights organization. The NRA is an organization that protects gun manufacturers. They couldn't care less about what happens with them afterwards. To see who next week's Hypocrite of the Week will be, tune in to Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left, that's right. Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Central on blogtalkradio.com/LiberalDan.
So yeah, NRA, and I understand if you're a conservative who's watching, you're probably going to respond and say, but Donald Trump's going to be there and the Secret Service won't let you have a gun in there. But it doesn't matter, because if you go to CPAC, if you go to other NRA conventions where Donald Trump was not going to be there because he's a former president and gets Secret Service protection still, if you were going to go to those other conventions when he wasn't president or when he wasn't a former president, you still couldn't bring a gun because they're hypocrites. They're afraid of what their people might do with a gun at their own conventions, but when it comes to everywhere else, oh, you should be free to have a gun. It's ridiculous. So let's see. Let's go back. Let's see. Wonder what happened to the port. Let's see. The tunnels where many cops got injured trying to prevent them from getting in there. Yes, that's true. And, I'm sure he crossed a barricade. I'm sure that guy crossed a barricade to get there. And one of the things that conservatives are like, well, the cops opened the barricades for them. And I'm like, yeah, those cops should be arrested too if they haven't already been arrested. And they should have lost their jobs if they haven't lost their jobs. If a cop opens your door to your house and I walk into your house, that doesn't make me trespassing in your house any less illegal, any more legal. I'm still not allowed to trespass in your house. It doesn't matter if a cop says, sure, you can go in. If a cop goes, hey, I just did a drug bust, and I only need this amount of drugs to get a felony conviction, but I have this bunch that's left. So why don't you take it, and you can sell the drugs, and I'll take a cut of it because I supplied you for the drugs, but I'll take a cut when you sell it. And just because a cop tells you that you can do something illegal, it doesn't mean that you can do something that's illegal. No cop has the authority to allow you to break the law. They don't. It's now you could go down trial and a jury could basically do jury nullification and say, okay, well, you were guilty, whatever, but we don't think you should be punished for what you did, so therefore we're going to do jury nullification. Maybe that at that point the jury can say, you know what, we're gonna not convict you. A president can say, okay, we're going to make sure that you're no longer punished for this crime you're convicted of, so we can pardon you. But police officers don't have that power. Police officers cannot grant you the authority to act extra legally, if you will. Let's see. So we got 41 viewers here. Again, this is Liberal Dan Radio, Talk from the Left, That's Right, liberaldan.com. Again, if you're not following me, subscribing here, subscribe. Liberal Dan Radio here on YouTube, or if you're listening on Blog Talk Radio, blogtalkradio.com/liberaldan. Do want to give a shout out to Nimbus Yosh, my little brother with the smooth sounds of the Percy podcast, the host of the most. I told him that he needs to get a podcast going because he had some fans just from his commercial. We'll see what happens. I've also told him that we need to form Voltron soon. So, hey Wes, how's it going? And forming Voltron is what we call when we get all of the people together. Him, Chris, one of the other Liberal Dan Radio patrons, Demonox, World According to Knox is his podcast. He is also one of the Liberal Dan Radio patrons. Shouts out also to Cesar and Angie, both Liberal Dan Radio Patreons as well. We call each other Big Brother and Little Brother, Aaron. We're not really related. We just say I'm his big brother. He's his little brother. He's my little brother, although he's taller than me, but I'm older than him. So that's pretty much. I'm Big Brother Dan, and he's my little brother, the host of the most, Nimbus Yosh, with the smooth sounds of the Percy podcast. Wes, I want a podcast too, just to talk to Hal Sparks. I mean, you too can get a podcast, but then you have to have Hal Sparks' agent reach out to you and say, hey, would you like to have Hal on the show? And I was like, yes, please. Absolutely, because I've been a fan of Hal for a very long time, since his Talk Soup days. So I've since seeing stuff on Comedy Central, seen his stand-up specials and everything like that. So Aaron, I want a Percy podcast. Well, maybe I get an Anchor account, and you could probably harass him on Anchor. Go to the Percy podcast on Anchor. You can leave messages to him that he can respond to. I have an Anchor account as well, and I should be doing a couple of more podcasts. Maybe try and do it once a month, but no one's really. We'll see. There's some people listening. More people listen to this, so I'm focusing more on this now. Let's see. Me too, Dan, and I'm older than you. Okay. sorry. I just had my last week was my 46th birthday, so I'm getting up there in age. I'm not, everything's creaking, everything's aching, all that fun stuff. So let's go ahead. We're going to take a commercial break, to just the first commercial break. Let me wet my whistle a little bit because my throat's been really pissing me off today, and I've been fighting a cough all day long. So let's go ahead and take the first commercial break, come back, and Hal should be on at that point. This is Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left. That's right.
Are you planning a trip to Disney soon? Do you want help avoiding spending mistakes and making the most of your vacation? Then check out Budgeteers.com, a new site devoted to helping you get the most mouse for your money. What kind of tickets should you get? Is the dining plan a good deal for you? Should you stay on grounds or not? Should you buy park hoppers? Many other sites are filled with information about what other people like to do, but Budgeteers is geared to help you make the best decision for you. So check out Budgeteers.com or go to YouTube.com/Budgeteers and help make your trip the best it can be. Budgeteers.com is not a travel agency and it is not affiliated with the Disney Corporation or any of its holdings. In a world gone mad, one progressive will do a bad movie trailer guy impression to get you to listen to his show. There's only one thing that I like better than the Liberal Dan Radio Minicast. All right, Bill, that's enough of that. On the Liberal Dan Radio Minicast, you will hear an honest discussion of the day's issues, with some personal bits in between. You might even hear what the other side has to say, sometimes even in their own voices. So become one of the Liberal Dan family, because family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. To hear those bad impressions and more, tune into the Liberal Dan Radio Minicast. Talk from the left, that's right. And I think to myself, what a wonderful show. Yeah. If you enjoy Liberal Dan Radio, there's many ways that you can support the show. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can like me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter or TikTok. And you can become a Liberal Dan Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you can get a shout-out. Higher levels get the opportunity to vote on what I do next on the podcast, the minicast, or on YouTube. You can even buy commercial advertising or sponsor bits. So go to patreon.liberaldan.com and support the show today.
Hey there, podcast listeners. This is Demonox, host of The World According to Nox. It's time for Season 2, where I take you on another trip through my world. The world of movies, video games, pop culture, and more. Relate them to the world around you. Don't forget to leave a question for Marscat, and find me on Twitter by the handle XDeminox. That's the letter X like X-Men, DEMINOX. Now enjoy the rest of your podcast.
And welcome back to Liberal Dan Radio, Talk from the Left, that's right. This is your host, Dan Zimmerman, coming at you from New Orleans, Louisiana. To join the show, join us in the chat room at either at blogtalkradio.com/liberaldan or youtube.com/liberaldanradio. Someone in the chat, I'll be 59 in August, Dan, you're still a young man. Well, I'd probably say, my wife would probably say I'm 46 going on 13 when it comes to my sense of humor. But anyway, without further ado, I'd like to welcome back on the show host of infotainmentwars.com, Hal Sparks Mega Worldwide. You might also know him from Talk Soup, Lab Rats, or Queer as Folk. Friend of the show, Hal Sparks. How are you doing, Hal, today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing fighting a cough. That's why I took my commercial break to make sure I could get more hydrated. But yeah, I'm fighting a cough.
If you need to just have a heaving fit, go at it.
I'll mute myself and you can talk. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, post-COVID, I feel like you could just kind of work that into the show, these days.
I think I did one bit or something earlier on when I just did like just a coughing fit at the end of everything, just to kind of perpetuate that whole thing. But and it's weird because I have like one time I think I can mute myself, but I inadvertently, when I was talking to you, the conversation with you when I muted you from the Blog Talk Radio still went through the YouTube, so nobody heard me, but everyone heard you. So it was funny. I'm still getting used to some of the technology stuff, but especially combining the podcast.
Well, I'll consider myself forewarned.
Anyway, so what's new in the world of Hal Sparks?
Well, I just came off a sort of semi-grueling weekend of stand-up. I was at the San Diego Laugh Factory for 3 days, 5 shows, and then I got back. I was home for a full-on half a day, and then had to go to L.A. for, chose to, I won't say have to go host the Ultimate Jam Night at the Whiskey, where we celebrated the music, because it was the Queen's birthday week. So we celebrated the music of, Britain rocks. So I did a couple of Beatles songs and a Def Leppard song, and sang back up on everything from Motorhead to Led Zeppelin and David Bowie. So it was a good time. It ended up being an amazing show. It was really great.
Now I saw Def Leppard in concert a few years back, and he was struggling to hit the high notes. So you might have done a better job singing Def Leppard than Def Leppard might be doing.
Well, you do know that a lot of those high notes on the album are actually Mutt Lange.
Oh, wow.
The producer, especially on the album Hysteria, like the super, super bizarrely high notes. Mm-hmm. There's like 100, vocal tracks deep on those things. And a lot of them are Mutt Lange just messing around in the studio while everybody else is at home. Nice. Kind of like when the Beatles recorded like Abbey Road and Sgt. Pepper's, and they would, and George Martin, after they went home thinking they tracked a 4-person rock song, brought in a choir and, all kinds of like backup and that kind of stuff. Fairly hysterical.
So what is your favorite?
Very upset.
What is your favorite and/or go-to Beatles song to sing?
Wow. Well, I mean, I did Come Together last night, and that was really fun.
Nice.
Just because the lyrics are so, they're not really, they're curious because of the, I think it's the third line more than anything, where he goes, he bad production, he got Walrus Gumboot, he got Ono Sideboard, he won Spinal Cracker.
Right.
It seems to be about the band members. It's like they're going around the room. John's got Ono Sideboard, and Paul's got Walrus Gumboot, and bad production would be George Martin, and then Harrison, so it's that part's fascinating to me, because they're, because while a lot of their stuff sounded like they were, blitzed to the bejesus belt on drugs,
right,
a lot of it had its own subtle logic to it. And my band, 01, we do our own version of Helter Skelter, which is we play around with the arrangement and how it's built, but that one's really fun as well.
Nice.
I mean, I would love to do the entire Sgt. Pepper's album, a la like Cheap Trick.
Right.
But I've only got 4 guys in my band.
Right. Man, so I think I don't have a band, but like when I do karaoke, I think my go-to Beatles song would probably be Something. Of course, one time I went to karaoke and I put Something by the Beatles, and the smartass karaoke KJ had me do Hard Day's Night, because Hard Day's Night is Something by the Beatles.
Something by the Beatles, yeah. Absolutely.
I was like, and I've never done it. I didn't know if it was in my range yet, and I was fine, but I was just like, I'm gonna kill you. But I think one of the fun one, is the brilliant lyrics of "Why don't we do it in the road?"
Right.
I mean,
yeah, or Rocky Raccoon.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cute songs the Beatles have as well, amongst the, even beyond their kind of reputation as being the soundtrack of the Manson family, which is an odd, historical credit that they have and will have forever.
Right. So shout out to Comic Rose in the chat room who says Sparkles assembled and smash that like. Thank you very much. Again, like and share the video if you like what you're seeing. And
yes, I insist.
So and one of the things I came in to your show earlier today at at just the perfect moment, the absolute perfect moment to hear this.
My dad's cock is a lot bigger than mine.
Yeah.
Right. What the hell?
The
like
look
we'd heard.
The look on your face was just amazing.
That, like, clip of, oh my God! And that's why I don't pre-watch the clips ahead of time. Mainly because I don't have to prep myself to outsmart these guys. But and like even like that clip of him saying the penis has gotten shorter and blah 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 that he's been talking about from like these single-use studies that everybody turns into some big thing, which like I literally have a stand-up bit called New Study that's based on the fact that we have all these, like local news does it all the time. Caffeine's terrible for you. Caffeine's great for you. Like it depends on the week, right?
Right.
Or a movie comes out and they're like, a shark attack movie comes out, so there's a series of stories about like, our shark attack's on the rise, and it's just because it's a sideways promo of the movie. They do that all the time. And so when he takes this one story, this idea that plasticizing agents, which are estrogen mockers, which we've known for a long time, and this azatine thing, which is making, giving male frogs like egg sacs and stuff like that, doesn't make them gay. It gives them other parts, which is, I think, it doesn't because technically speaking, they'd be heterosexual. They would just have different parts. They would no longer be, I don't know. Anyways, it's a stupid semantical argument, but he wigs out about that part of it. When in reality, these are all like environmental concerns we all have about GMOs, about Monsanto, about Dow Chemical, messing with things that are of no surprise to anyone. You know what I mean? Like, and the fact that I think the thing that stands out with Alex Jones is that he portrays it as this giant plot when it's way simpler than that. It's just greed and incompetence. Yeah. Like the Occam's razor of most troubles in the world first it's just ignorance. Most people just don't know better. Right. Like they make something like, this will be great. Look at this. This makes a hot dog last for 25 years. And like, what a great idea. People won't starve. I'm solving a giant problem. And then years later, like, yeah, that makes you have a big face tumor. Oh, okay. Well, then rats,
Right.
We don't have to talk about the face tumor right out of the gate when I come on your show, do we? No. Giant cover up. Right. So that, that's where most of this stuff is.
Right.
But from Alex Jones's standpoint and Jimmy Dore's standpoint and Russell Brand's standpoint is that everything is a massive conspiracy. Everything is designed on the premise that, it's every mistake was on purpose for this masterful, mysterious plan that's operating behind the scenes. And nothing could be further from the truth.
And it's all triggered by the 5G.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah, he mentioned 5G. He did the whole gamut. He got everything in there. Davos, Soros, Tostitos. I don't know what we've got to be afraid of, but they're all dangerous. But it's an industry, man. If you really look at it, like these fear farmers on both YouTube and and Twitch it's a growth industry.
Right. And then you have all these horrible things that are coming, and then of course there are this big conspiracy, and then what can you do to help protect yourself from it? Buy their snake oil.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Buy their prepper food. Buy his B12 supplement, which looks like adrenochrome, ironically enough. And just like buy my gooey red drip that you can take orally. It's just gross. But like I said, lots of people over time have looked at the like mega church and the TV preacher industry with greed and amazement. You know, like, that's just, what a grift.
Right.
It's almost perfect. Except I'm supposed to, now I got to read the Bible and memorize it. Isn't there another way? Yeah, sure. Try the Alex Jones conspiracy way. You don't even have to memorize anything. You just have to connect whatever's in front of you like a puzzle piece that only fits because you insist that it does. Well, that's easy. Like, who can't manage that?
Well, the thing with being a mega preacher, though, is like, you really, like, the people, if as long as you get the people listening to you and believing you, you don't even have to get what's in there right. Like, you can, like, I've talked to many people who are Christian I'll be like, well, the Bible says this, because I was raised Jewish, and I learned a lot of the,
It does?
Yeah, and they're like, what? But even like, I didn't grow up learning anything about, like, the New Testament or the parts of the Bible that are not part of the Jewish Bible, and I still read it because I want to understand what people think, or whatever. I'm like, do you understand that, like, Acts 4 and 5 are basically telling you to be socialist? like there's a whole 2 chapters of that book that's like, give all of your money away to help people, or else you're not going to go to heaven. And what's the punishment for that? You die if you don't. I'm like, what? Socialism's bad, except for when the Bible tells me to do it. And you have, then you have the like. It's hard for me to understand a lot of the people on this whole abortion issue, because, you know, you have, like, as a Jewish person, again, you know, Jewish religion basically states, if your life's in danger, you must abort. Not just you have the option to, but you must save yourself. So the idea that, because the term
Judeo... Well, that's also because Judaism comes through a maternal line.
Right.
And so the life of the mother is super crucial.
Yeah.
Because if she dies, there will be no more Jews. And a lot of times, you know, one of the ways that the Jews were, you know, they tried to eliminate Jews was through rape. You know, much like the Prima Nocta, the British trying to rape the Scots out of existence, or the Irish. So, of course, that's going to be one of your, you know, protection setups to guarantee that Jewish mothers survive, especially when there's an attempt to make them cease to exist. So, you know, it makes total sense. In the Christian way of thinking, it leans more towards the Catholic idea, is that at a certain period, Muslims were outbreeding everyone, because they had the ability to kill off the heretics. So you could threaten people with death, and the Catholic Church had stopped that for the most part after about the 15th century. So they were, you know, always racing to catch up. I mean, you can even look at Fish on Fridays as an attempt at early environmentalism.
Right.
So it's not, you know, all of these things have come up as largely social order mechanisms. All the stuff that these guys decry about big government are effectively the very things that they're talking about in all these situations.
Right. And like, that's one of the reasons I don't like the term, like, Judeo-Christian, because I'm like, there's so many differences between the two religions. Yeah, you know, sure. That you use the Old Testament as a jumping off point, but then you completely retcon everything and you make it a completely different thing. Like, and I don't begrudge anybody for their faith. If you believe in God, if you want to practice your religion, great. Just don't make laws out of it, and we'll be good. And, like, one of the things I don't get is that, like, they won't like, if you have like a fetal problem, whatever, there's no way to do like a baptism in utero. So, but if the church believes that fertilization creates a new life, then all of those embryos that are naturally discarded, any embryo or fetus that's either naturally miscarried, or if there's like a fetal abnormality that causes fetal death, or any child that's born and doesn't get baptized before they die, like, all of those kids are going to hell. Like, I don't quite get that as a Jewish person.
Well, no, there's different, like, obviously, if there was a way to, you know, baptize people in utero, the Mormons would have figured it out a long time ago. But the idea about Christian faith specifically is different from Catholic faith. Catholic faith is baptism upon birth, because the minute that life is created, until you're born, you're not responsible for the sins that are brought upon your head.
So the birth gives you original sin.
Well, no, the birth begins your responsibility for it.
Okay.
Yeah. In Lutheran Christianity or evangelical Christianity or Baptist Christianity, baptism is a choice affected at the age of reason. So you're talking about 13, 14. Curiously, when your sexual impulses start to show up because of puberty, that's when you can become awful by their standard. Strikingly enough, and I was baptized when I was 11. You don't have to be in our church till you're 13, but it was definitely a part of the faith. Is the idea that at some point you make the choice. In the Christian faith, the way they also get around it is that up until that point, up until the age of reason, depending on whether it's 12 or 13 or 14, you die innocent because you are not responsible for sins because you're not anywhere near mature in that way of thinking. The Judeo-Christian thing, as far as calling it that, we used to regard ourselves as a Christian nation.
Right.
Because if you'll notice, the Judeos couldn't exactly go to all the golf courses.
Right, exactly.
And largely because of stuff that is written about Christ in the Talmud. So the dig specifically about, between Jews and Christians and why it's been an ongoing thing, largely with the Catholic Church and the evangelicals around Judaism, is because of not just descriptives of Jesus in the Talmud as not being a real Messiah, as being a phony or whatever, but some language that is unbecoming of religious talk about somebody else's. It's very heretical towards that stuff. So that's a constantly running rift between the two. Now the difference is that it was a rift. It was a religious rift between these two groups, and those exist without war all over the place. There's lots of Baptists and Lutherans aren't at each other's necks because they believe in a different punctuation essentially in Bible verses.
Right.
The difference is that once the Germans started wiping Jews out, the Christians rallied to the idea that Jews are integral to not only the faith but also the essence of being a good Christian. You don't have to you don't just root for the salvation and living of your own kind. It's not inborn like Judaism, and it's not forced like Islam is the theory. And so once Hitler crossed that line and started eliminating Jews, we shifted to accepting them in the United States. That was the kicking point. And so that
not initially
Christian.
Initially, the only way Jews
no, of course not.
The only way Jews could get in was with the job. Yeah. So there was a history there between the historically black college and universities that brought these physicists in over to help protect them from the Nazis. But I have a more cynical view of the look on at least why many evangelical types may have wanted to all of a sudden magically we got to save the Jews. It's because their prophecy requires Israel to have lots of Jews in it in order for the end times to come. So if Hitler,
wiped out. Yeah.
If Hitler offed all the Jews, then the end times can't happen.
Right. That's the deep evangelical side of it, which is not, at that time, was not the largest group.
True. In
many ways. The largest groups were Methodist and Lutheran, and most of their stuff was a lot more charitable. Charitable at an arm's length, but still, it was an act of we can't just leave them like that. And that was a total shift. And so it was historically speaking, quite charitable compared to their treatment elsewhere. For example, the evangelicals have always had this kind of, the Sarah Palin sects have always had this idea that we protect Israel so it can be burned to the ground in Armageddon. But the rest of them were well, it's just not Christian to let people die like that, was the theory. Anyways, but the point I'm trying to make is that phrase, Judeo-Christian, didn't become a big thing until after, or around World War II. That we would just refer to ourselves as a Christian nation up till that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just typing
it's
out
just
something
interesting when, historically, when the shift, when shifts like that occur, and there were a bunch of them in a row. I mean, you could arguably track that, that women getting the right to vote and then, there was a delay of recognition where they're like, okay, it's going to be a little longer before, other people get their rights. But then it kind of all was built on that superstructure and came along fairly quickly. So in the 60s and then early 70s.
Right. Well, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the goings-on, I guess, both in Buffalo and in Texas.
Sure.
And I think it was Monday, maybe I was watching your show, and you were basically talking about how the inaction of government to do anything, and that we need some sort of laws in place to whatever. And you had suggested fingerprint detection, where only the owner can shoot
smart
it,
gun.
or smart gun, or gun can't go off in a certain area, stuff like that. And and then of course the next day, we have another one of these incidents, and of course conservatives, instantly are like, it's too soon to talk about this. Well, when is the time? When is the time?
We're not,
to talk about
and
it?
my response is, I'm not talking about this shooting. I'm talking about 10 shootings ago. It is not too soon to start talking about Parkland. So just assume anything I say is a response to what should have been done to fix something like Parkland after it happened.
And the victim, what about the victims? Have respect for the victims of those past shootings. Be they the ones who were killed or shot and lived, or witnessed the shooting and had to live through the terror of it, or the family who lost family members because of it, all want stuff to happen to be able to make it so it's harder for people to buy a gun, especially when they shouldn't buy a gun. There's the guy. There's a guy that I listen to on this. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I was saying one. Well, go ahead with that point, because I've got a kind of a solution, and that actually might require some explanation.
Okay, sure. So there's one of the guys that I mock on this show that I listen to every morning. It's a conservative show. This guy's called Cash Money or whatever, and he has this grand idea to ask everybody in the nation on some platform to a question. So 9 o'clock in the morning, you ask the America a question, and they tell you the answer. I was like, well, if you do that on universal background checks, you're going to get 90% of the country saying do universal background checks. But the politicians aren't going to do it, because the politicians are beholden to the NRA, and the NRA is not really about gun rights. The NRA is about gun manufacturing and making sure that the gun manufacturers can sell whatever they want to, and then who cares what happens with it.
Right. Yeah. There's a myriad of complex issues in gun rights and that complexity gets exploited every time we go through one of these situations. Instead of dealing with a solution based on the issue at hand. Because as somebody who has a lot of gun owners in my family, grew up in Kentucky, there's a bunch of sport gunners and people with that collect guns, and my dad's house, I've always joked, is a U.S. Marshal accident subpoena waiting to happen, because of just the nature of how many things he has, and largely it's they're flintlock shotguns and stuff like that. But I don't necessarily have an issue with the Second Amendment if it's actually carried out the way it's supposed to, where it's genuinely written, which of course is in regard to a well-regulated militia. Right. That phrase in and of itself gives you a ton of leeway about very basic laws, and the issue that we have most of all, and I think this goes towards Russian and Chinese and Iranian and propaganda that's been pushed towards the United States that makes everybody fear their own government all the time. When you have a tremendous number of freedoms that aren't going to be taken away anytime soon, can't be legally, is this idea that the tyrannical government that they were talking about, in the Federalist Papers and the like, was a foreign monarchical power that would come in and tear our Constitution to pieces. Not our own government, not our own soldiers and our own cops. That's a relative absurdity, and it gets more absurd the more modern we get.
Right.
Like you could almost believe it when there were still people who were, friendly towards the idea of monarchy, 140 years ago. But now it's absurd. The idea that that's how it's going to happen is just dumb. And having, consumer guns versus, for self-defense versus offensive guns for trying to, form your own, militia to destroy your own government from within is a wholly different customer base.
Right.
And let's just say that you could start very easily with allowing smart guns to be sold, which is, again, freedom. The market can dictate. If somebody wants to buy a gun that only they can fire, they should have every right to do that. The idea that somebody could take your gun from you and harm you with it, or your kid can sneak it out of a cabinet and take it to school and fire it without permission, or that you couldn't put a guard on that if somebody has a mental health issue, you can give the parents or a responsible party the ability to basically shut off their thumbprint, on their guns for the time being. Now, could they get somebody else's? Could they get a free flying one? Yes, absolutely. But it would limit what they would stack up. And you could say that kids, like people under the age of 25, unless they've been in the military, can't have a non-smart lock gun.
Right.
You earn that right over time, those kind of things. And all that does, by the way, it doesn't stop you from using it. It stops you from misusing it. And then again, having regular ones without that is one thing. But if you do it by choice, and you allow people to choose to do that, you eliminate a lot of the guns and the free flow of guns to the wrong people all the time. Because if you sell somebody the gun, there's a trail as to who could fire it before, who can fire it now, the exchange of the fingerprint, all those elements, which would be incredibly valuable and stop these kind of things.
Right.
The other thing is, and this was, I don't know why this hasn't come up, but the guy who shot up the place and Ethan Crumbly also had this, the Michigan shooter. A lot of them have had these kind of run-ins where they were they willfully went in on a psych hold, but they were not involuntarily committed. And you have to be involuntarily committed to keep you from buying a gun. I think that anybody who goes in on a voluntary psych hold should have a 5-year pause on their ability to purchase a gun, especially if they're young. If you're, 16 and you go on a voluntary psych hold, and at 18, like this kid today, you could, or day before yesterday rather, you could buy this gun at 18. There should be some sort of standard wherein you have to, you can have that taken away from you, at least for an evaluation period. Let's say you can't do it. I mean, these are all just common sense, I would think. Right. You go in, your parents commit you, or you go in on a psych eval and you have to stay over a couple of days. And if there's a category of things, doesn't even have to say what, but if you were like threatening somebody or threatening to harm yourself, those kind of things, which is usually what these things involve, then once you turn 18, you have another 3 years after that, or whatever, 5 years after that, before you can buy a gun. And if you want to, because you were a teen and you were going through a phase, you can go to a judge and have a hearing and say, Your Honor, I'm fine. I want to be able to buy a gun to go hunting and do these things, and I'm sane, and here's why, and I got a psych eval, and I'm okay. Like, you do those things. I think that's a reasonable fix that most, even even your most egregious pro-gun people would be okay with. And it's just a matter of introducing it at some point. And there's going to be a bunch of these things, that people are going to propose. The problem is that after these big attacks, we tend to throw them all in one bill and go after them. And right. I think one of the one of the things we need to do is start doing, single serving laws about each of these things. What was the problem with this guy's ability to buy a gun that we can fix that fits a law that's already on the books, and it's a minor tweak? And I really do think if you start battening down the hatches in this particular arena by going, okay, he slipped through the cracks. Why? Well, it was because of this. Okay, well, let's just do a mild variation on this. A 3-month, 6-month, 7-month evaluation, a 5-year moratorium on the purchase or ownership of guns, those kind of things after having a commitment like that, or a non, custodial commitment, those kind of things. Like, you just fix that little piece. And I do think you could get those things through, because then Republicans could pat themselves on the back and say, see, we did something. We're not doing all the other stuff and scaring off everybody else. And these are very specific to the problem at hand. And after, and these will continue because they don't give a crap. And I'm like, Ted Cruz just ran off a list of like 6 mass shootings in Texas. He was like, I was in El Paso. I was down there in Albuquerque. I went to the one in da-da-da. I'm like, dude, do you see a pattern here?
And it did nothing.
You think your state... Yes, right. And you're still not going to change a damn thing. So they're going to keep happening in Texas. They are. They're going to keep happening in other states, but it's going to be worse in the states where they have a gun culture where everybody thinks they have the right to hash things out down the barrel of a gun. And in that process, you can... those guys, even the Ted Cruzes of the world, maybe not all of them, but enough of them to get 60 votes, would be willing to add this, like, if you've been, if you've had a psych hold or something like that, a moratorium of 5 years for you buying a gun, and you can always have a hearing to undo it. Cool. I think that's one of those things where you could solve a bunch of these things.
Right.
You could actually, you could potentially protect people. Anything helps. Any way that you can keep, elements of these things from ever happening again, you take them. You don't go all or nothing. There's too many lives that are too important that need to be saved, to just kind of go, well, since we can't get everything, never mind. That's madness.
And I mean, I am always for, like, doing things piecemeal. Like, you can't, sometimes incrementalism is the way to go. And a lot of people just hate incrementalism because it's too slow for them and they're impatient. My only concern with even the incrementalism thing is that our politics has become so toxic that pretty much the Republicans will oppose anything just simply because the Democrats want it. Even if it makes sense, even if they think it's a good idea, they'll still oppose it because the Democrats want it, and agreeing with the Democrat is a sin. You can't. It's the biggest sin you could do.
Right. Well, a lot of the bills that pass are co-sponsored, and especially ones in the House. You end up having a Democrat and a Republican sign on to it, and also these people do have constituents. The vast majority of people in the United States, polling-wise, are for common sense gun laws. This is one of those that you could argue, and again, I know it's like giving these folks an inch always seems to feel like it's biting you later. But if it ends up saving lives, I don't care, because ultimately they're on their way out long term anyways.
But the only thing that is like the pressure from the voters in those like red states, for example, where they would agree with the those things, like the hold if you've had if you voluntarily involuntarily hold, like the voters then have to say, if you don't pass this, I will vote for the other guy. I will vote you out for somebody who will do this, and they have to prove that they'll do it. And for Louisiana, I have a feeling like you're very unlike, even though we have a Democratic governor, because he got lucky 2 times. Because he ran against the whoremonger the first time, and look, I'm sex positive, sex work is real work, but that's his own standards that he set for himself. And then the next guy was like a Trump wannabe with even less brain. Like he was like a deer in headlights in the one thing that they had, and he was able to just barely beat him because there was enough people who didn't care that he had no idea what he was doing, but enough people were like, it's insane to let this person take control, especially actually it was before COVID, and I'm so thankful that we didn't get that guy during COVID, because we would have been in a much worse place. But I don't know how many people in like Louisiana would have the guts to say, you know what, I'm not going to vote for you, Senator Kennedy, if you don't support this. I'm going to kick you out and put somebody else in there who will support that. And if it ends up being Kennedy versus a Democrat,
right? I mean, yeah. I don't think you're absolutely right that they're not going to swap them for a Democrat. But what you would do over time is give a sensible Republican a toehold, and that would move it in the direction that you want, instead of this entrenched lunacy that passes for the Republican Party right now, because again, the all or nothing stratagem. So I'm always of the belief that if you gave somebody in the primary who's just like a regular family values person, and that these people weren't choosing, like feeling like they had to pick between, their two choices are Rand Paul or AOC. That's right. The way they look at these fights, right? And they're never going to vote for AOC because that's not the area they are. And the only option they're getting is Ted Cruz or John Kennedy or something like that. That does not have to be the case. And what you do is you give, effectively what are the Kasichs a chance, and then you're arguing politics and policy with someone instead of just some idiot who only pushes back because they've got a big R on their jersey.
Right. I'd love to see that. I'd love, and a lot of times people on the left get angry when people like Pelosi says we need better Republicans instead of just trying to defeat the Republicans. Like, but we need better Republicans. Idiots. We need sane Republicans.
You don't have a choice. There is no such world where it's a world without Republicans.
Right.
So you're either going to get good ones or you're going to get a mess. And if your argument is, well, better to have the mess, then you're just arguing for the burning down. You don't really care about, then it's just you're just as much involved in the politics as they are.
Right.
You know what I mean? There are no good R's. That's their version of there are no good Dems. Like that's, and if that's your approach, it's no wonder that they own all the rural states, even though a lot of policies that Democrats are for poll very well.
Right.
In a lot of these places. You gave it to them.
Right. The Affordable Care Act, in each little piece of the Affordable Care Act polls very well amongst everybody. But the Obamacare polls terribly. Why? Because Obama's name's on it. But, what do you want this from the Affordable Care Act? Whatever it is, whatever this is. Yes, that sounds great. Well, it's in the Affordable Care Act. Oh. And it's just... But I mean, we have your loonies on the left too. Before I tuned into your show this afternoon, I had flipped on the Young Turks, and Eric Kasparian was calling Biden sleepy. I'm like, first of all, shouldn't be using a conservative talking point, a conservative name, and allowing them to get that foothold in there. And B, I don't know if you didn't watch Biden's speech last night after the shooting. I almost cried. He almost cried. I mean, he's sitting there talking about children who died way too young. I mean, any children dying is tragic, but this is a man who lost a child when he was a younger adult.
He knows what he's talking about.
He knows that feeling. He can empathize with those. And even if he hadn't done all that, he is still a type of person who can empathize. My grandparents knew him. They worked on one of his first campaigns. They always gushed about what a good, decent human being that he was. And the only thing I cried on Inauguration Day because they both passed away very recently, but they did not get to see him get elected, and they would have loved to have seen that happen. But I mean, he has somebody with empathy, and his speech, we all know he has a stutter, but that speech was so well done and so moving, and for anybody to mock him on that, it just drives me crazy. And it's like, and they're like, when are you going to stand up to the lobby? I mean, we don't live in a dictatorship. Biden can only do so much. There's some things maybe he can do with executive orders, but we don't live in a dictatorship. He needs a Congress that will pass things that he can then sign.
The lunacy and I push this on my show a lot, and I hope people can grasp this. But we have 48 elected Democrats in the Senate.
Right.
We have two independents that caucus with us. But we absolutely do not. The Republican Party has elected more of their members to the Senate than we have. Through the process of democracy, they have gotten more people elected. Now, they have a head start because of rural states with low population. That's also our fault, right? Because, this fear, or this derision around, the mansionization of rural Democrats, that they have to sound like AOC, or they're, the all or nothing concept has basically eliminated the possibility of claiming, places like the Dakotas and other places, which we absolutely could get.
Well, that was one of our problems.
Willing to recognize.
That was one of our problems earlier today. Let's see. Let me pull up the tweet that I had. There was the election in, I think it was Texas's 28th. Cuellar against, I forget the other person, but there's the incumbent who is a pro-life, pro-gun Democrat in that district. And running against the progressive in the primary, and it's a very close race, and it looks like the incumbent won. But AOC was mad that the establishment supported the incumbent over the new person because the new person was more ideologically pure. But my question is, if you look at the 2020 results in that election, that district went I think 51-49 or even closer Biden-Trump, whereas the incumbent, the person who the Democratic congressman, won with 58% of the vote. So there's plenty of crossover.
Right. He did better than Biden, and Biden did better than expected.
Yeah, Biden did better than expected, and that guy won because he's a conservative Democrat. Now, do I want somebody who's as left as possible in every district? Sure, but as left as possible as long as they win. If it doesn't, I don't.
Well, that's the other thing is, yeah, you do. Of course you do, but you don't live in that district.
Right.
So you either believe in representative democracy or you don't. Right. And the reality is that these folks, you're basically decrying representative democracy in those moments because these districts are not as left-leaning as the blue states that she turned, or the blue areas she and Mo and Jayapal and all these, the blue areas, they turned bluer. All they did was run as a younger, fresher face in an area that was always Democrat.
Right.
We don't have, none of the squad got elected in a purple district or a red district ever. In none of these areas. One of the things that, though, when I saw I was happy to see AOC win when she did, because, again, fresh face, new ideas, good. But I was wondering, how are her supporters, the progressive people that helped put her into office, how are they going to react when she has to make a deal, when she has to not or support something that's not her ideal in order to get work done? And I've seen there's examples where they berate her for it. It's with the Young Turks thing, I was watching the Young Turks bashing, Biden for not doing things that he can't do. And I'm wondering how they would have acted had Bernie won, had Bernie Sanders got the Democratic nomination, and had he won the presidency, but if he with the same Congress, and I don't even think we would have had the same Congress. I don't know if Bernie would have won Georgia or won the Senate for the Democrats for Georgia. I don't know if Bernie would have brought enough votes along for that. Only Earth 2 knows. I don't think he would have, but that's a guess. But what would they have done if you had Bernie Sanders with the existing Congress, that he can't get what he wants, and he wouldn't get Medicare for all passed. He wouldn't get many of the things he ran on passed. And I'll go one deeper on that. Okay, so there is no situation, there's no president without a military strike of some sort, even if it's defensive, even if it's an evac. We have troops in places that are very dangerous. And so to clear the road, to get them out, to do all kinds of things, even if your idea was total extraction, isolationism, as we learned in Afghanistan, when you're in someplace for 20 years, just getting out is going to be brutal because there is no other way. So the question is, what is the response to Bernie Sanders' first drone strike look like?
Right.
Even if it's a perfect hit, no collateral damage, no civilian damage, which is the goal of every Democrat when they're in there, and Republicans every time they get in couldn't care less where those things land. There are no good guys. It doesn't. If we miss, we're just hitting some more. It's just a win of another kind.
Right.
Whereas there's no way, Bernie's going to send troops in, for example, to extract somebody. So it's going to be a drone because drones don't come home in flag draped coffins. And so he's going to do that. What do you think the response is going to be, or the chances of him getting reelected past one term once that happens? It's zero.
Right, because
also, yeah,
politicians campaign on their ideal, and then they have to govern from their reality. Like, a lot of people get mad as like, oh, Biden promised this, Biden promised that, and so they're I gotcha, and I'm like, every single time a politician runs on a quote promise to get some sort of legislation passed, it's always there should always be the implied, if you also elect a Congress to get this done, to pass this to me so I can sign it. Whereas, like there's some things that you could do that you can make promises on and that doesn't require anything. Like somebody ran on, I'm not going to do signing statements, and I think Obama did. Obama ran, I'm not going to do signing statements. Of course, then Obama did a signing statement. And at that point, fine. You would be correct in criticizing Obama for going back on a campaign promise because that's an actual promise that he could have done without anybody else's help. But
yeah, until everybody was clamoring about DACA, by the way.
Right, exactly.
Because it turned out that was the only way he could salvage DACA.
Right. But like I ran for Congress back in 2004. And I made specifically on my campaign side, I didn't make promises. I said, this is what I will fight for when in Congress. These are what I will propose when I go to Congress. So I could follow through with my, quote, promises, because my promises wasn't to get it passed, but it's to propose these things and try and get them passed. As long as I tried, I would be successful. Right. But I'm not so pedantic that I'm going to require a congressperson to, maybe, David Vitter made a promise or said that anybody who cheats on their spouse should resign from office. That is something that doesn't require anybody else's help. I criticized him for not resigning after it was revealed.
Right.
But, voters should be smart enough to understand that when somebody says something on a campaign, there's implied other people have to help me do this or else I'm not going to get it done. So, and unfortunately, either they don't
especially
or the
ironically,
people... Go ahead.
You saw Anna's screw the Democrats thing around Roe v. Wade the other day, where she's like, I'm done. These Democrats don't do anything, blah, blah, blah. And the irony that, it was her and TYT specifically that talked enough voters out of voting for Hillary Clinton that got Trump within shooting distance in swing states. Those 75,000 voters were people who left the president. They voted in other things, but they left out a presidential candidate because while they were never going to vote for Trump, they couldn't bring themselves to vote for this neocon, neo-lib, neo-woman, that was running. And they had vilified her for years as this baby-killing warmonger monster. And then 3 weeks before the election, when it looks like Trump's going to actually win, they're like, but you should vote for her, and they're like, our conscience is clear. We told everybody to vote for her. What now?
Right.
So it's embarrassing. But the idea is, and I say this on my show, if you're ever confronted with a choice that's the lesser of two evils, choose less evil.
I've got to the point where I quote you.
That's your only option.
I got to the point where when somebody says whatever, I'll be like, Hal Sparks says, and I agree. If you ever confronted with the choices of two evils, choose the less evil. Yeah, I give you credit.
Yeah, and this is something that parents, I think, as somebody with a son, and somebody who cared about my own parents as one, in my own behavior, and in my own life when I was, in situations which might not have been ideal, that's the realistic thing. You don't get to not make a choice. That's not an option. You
Right.
can BS yourself, thinking you can, but that's not an option. If you don't make a choice in this, what you're doing is you're giving away that choice to someone else. And that level of trust game, especially when it comes to somebody like Donald Trump. And like I said, like Trump's, his, civilian casualties while Trump was president from military strikes were every bit were, he had as many civilian deaths in the first year of his presidency as Obama did in all 8 years. And if you don't care about that number, then I don't want to hear. It's just like pro-lifers who like the capital punishment and are pro-gun. I know you're full of crap. Like, this is just a lie. You're basically just trying to get points for being special or holier than thou. It's old-fashioned religious piety in a fresh semi-atheist box or something. But it's not based on any real ethic or any belief that you can actually help anyone. And nobody in this life, first of all, as far as incrementalism goes, every great change in your life has happened incrementally, even after a revolutionary decision. You made a goal one year to lose weight or work out or get healthy or any of that kind of stuff. But the work was done incrementally. The work was done, day by day, morning to night. You get up, you develop a habit, you help yourself by staying consistent with it. Again, these are not real change is never done through revolution. And if it is, it can be undone the same way. And that's one of the lessons I don't know that a lot of folks, I mean, it's not sexy, but it's got teeth, as they said in The Untouchables. You do the daily work. Real healthcare is not about getting your stomach stapled. It's about a good diet and exercise plan and actually applying it and sticking to it every day. And that's how governing works. There was a movie a while back, and the title was Constant Gardener. Mm-hmm. And I've always loved that, that phrase as an idea around, governance and creating a functioning society, because that's really what you're doing. You're always pulling weeds. You're always trying to, make it as best you can, clean up the mess every day. It's nobody showers once and you're done. Nobody goes to the gym once and you're fit. It's absurd. Right. So anybody who decries incrementalism, I'm like, so you just ate once and you're never going to be hungry again? What are you talking about? Like that, it's just odd. And all positive change, habitual change, is incremental, and by sticking to a plan, being forgiving of yourself, so you can get started over again if you fail, right? Which is also antithetical in so many ways to the kind of purity, ideas that they pitch at everyone.
Yeah. People have to be allowed to fail.
If an alcoholic falls off the wagon, you can't have everybody go, well, you're not allowed back in AA ever again.
Right.
I'm sorry, you're just done. Like, who would do that? What kind of cruel idea is that about your fellow humans? And I think it's partly because we do tend to dehumanize politicians, even though they represent us. TYT is always dehumanizing police officers. Like, it's nonstop. Like, it's just gross. And it's past the point of even like, the Derek Chauvins of the world. It's just all of them all the time. They're all this way, to the point where Gavin Long, a TYT viewer and one of their little cub reporters, he did a couple of when they were doing that kind of citizen journalism stuff. Mm-hmm. He shot 4 cops. One of them, he killed 3 of them, ambushed them, shot them all in the head. One of them's permanently in a wheelchair, paralyzed. Cognitively, he's never going to be the same again. He does not. He's basically living out his life as he wastes away in a wheelchair. And what was TYT's response? They copyright blocked all of his videos so that people couldn't trace them back to the fact that he was a fan. these folks do not actually have a plan for solving, the genuine, concept of crime or any of these things. They don't. It's not their problem. What they do is they sell utopia to a bunch of people who are exhausted and anxious, and go, I can get rid of your anxiety and your exhaustion. I can talk you out of that, because if only we got my one thing that I'm working on done, it would all start working swimmingly. It doesn't have to be piece by piece. If you just put me in charge, I'll do this. Well, that's never going to happen. It's never true. It's never been true. It wasn't true for maggots. It wasn't true for Trump. Look at how little he actually accomplished.
Right.
Pitiful. If you look at what actually happened during the Trump years, our system managed incredibly well against his onslaught, keeping him, well within the, just the realm of just being a generalized Nixonian fuck up.
You have the people coming out now. They're like, he wanted to shoot missiles into
hang Mike Pence
into Mexico or whatever, and he was like, they wouldn't know.
Right.
They wouldn't know it was us. I'm like, yes, they would know it was us, because it's coming from the north. It's us. Don't be an idiot. He was talking about he was talking about firing missiles at cartel sites and stuff, because he'd seen a clear and present danger, and learned the exact opposite story. He learned the exact opposite moral. That's a conservative thing, though. Conservatives, I think every conservative who read or had read to them The Boy Who Cried Wolf, I think the lesson that conservatives tend to get from that is we should continue to believe somebody who lies in case they tell the truth later. And Trump lied this many times. Well, what if he's telling the truth this time? But you shouldn't trust him because he lied so many times. Oh, well, it's they got the
and then we find out,
message from it.
And then we find out from Mark Meadows' testimony that he whether jokingly or not, floated the idea that maybe Mike Pence should be hung, as people were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." And apparently he was pissed that they were getting Mike Pence out of there and getting him to safety, because he thought him being in danger was the only thing that was gonna get him to acquiesce and come around to stopping the Electoral College count.
And that's why he didn't send any troops in for hours.
Right. And he was mad that, he's, now that he's not there anymore, well, then who cares?
Right.
Because he'll just wait it out. And we're going to, crap. Now we got to go to plan B, which is, the Rudy Giuliani, we, pretend we already won.
Right. But if they believe that Donald Trump won and is the real president, then they can't vote for him again in 2024 because it's illegal for him to have 3 terms, right?
Right, but the system was torn away from him and it was rigged, and so it's okay to rig it that way. That's they all think that. That's why they all voted twice. Every time they find these people who voted multiple times, their reasoning was they thought they had the right to, because Trump told them they could,
right? Which
is just in lunacy. But also they thought they wouldn't get caught, or that their excuse would be that he had told them that their vote was going to be stolen, so they were only voting once because they figured one of their votes would be stolen. There's always going to be an excuse from those guys for him.
Right. Well, it's like the old saying, Republicans will be like, the government is so bad, now elect me and I'll prove it to you. Republican voters will be like, voting is so unsecure. Let me show you how unsecure it is. I'm going to vote twice and prove to you how insecure it is. Meanwhile, voting fraud. If you look
and then
I did a video on.
And then they get arrested, and they're like, "What did I do?"
Right. I'm just here for Trump, and then they get mad. I played a clip from Jake, what's the guy's last name? The guy, one of the January 6th insurrectionists or whatever, and he's one of the guys. He got mad at Trump because Trump didn't pardon him. I'm like, well, what do you think was going to happen? He was going to care about what you did? No, you were expendable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he, I've said this before, but like Trump thinks that if you win in court because you deserve to, there's nothing impressive about that. You know, if you're innocent, you get away with it. So what? You're supposed to.
Right.
And you're a sucker if you got caught in the first place because you're, you know, supposedly, you know, somebody thought you were guilty. Whereas if you're actually guilty and you get away with it, that really shows you've got, you know, skills. So that's why he liked these kind of like frivolous lawsuits, because if he lost, he didn't really care. It was a mess anyways. He was going to lose. And if he won, it was just like, look how I can wrap these courts around my finger. And a lot of times he would just use, and he would use other people's money specifically to try and, you know, outspend his opponents. Kind of this Reagan-esque Cold War plan where he basically had an unending supply of Deutsche Bank money that he could sue, you know, HOAs and renters groups and the city. And, you know, and they were like, well, we could keep at this, but we're going to spend all this taxpayer money or go broke, and he's probably going to weasel out of paying it in the first place.
Right.
So what difference is it?
Or on the contractor side, on the contractor side, they do a job for him. He says, I'm only going to pay you half. And then they're like, wait. And then it was like, well, sue us. And then they have to make them, do I pay attorney to get the money back and then lose more money than I got? Or do I just take this money and suck it up? You know, the guy's a grifter. I mean, he's
he always has been.
Right. That's what
and it appeals to, you know, that kind of people. Like they're all very impressed by this. Like a dude who can scam the system. If you've been told for your whole life that government is the problem, the system is set up against everybody anyways. The rich are they got a head start on everything, and then you got this guy come along who just rigs the system and doesn't care. He's kind of like he's their version of Robin Hood. It explains the mythology around him, because they really do feel like he's their revenge against the system, even if he means ill. Even if he's, you know, a criminal about it, there's kind of this Jesse James idea. They put his head on all these, you know, on Rambo and Rocky, but in reality, they view him more as like Zorro or Jesse James. And it's not surprising that they stick with him in that regard, because again, you've had the system vilified for so long. I mean, Rand Paul, like Jimmy Dore ran a whole thing on Rand Paul, and the concept was that, like, Rand Paul asked, I think somebody from DHS or somebody, like, the greatest, you know, who the greatest liar in the history of the world is, and they said who, and he goes, the U.S. government. Like, this is a sitting U.S. senator.
Right.
That's like a Russia Today talking point. And secondly, have you ever been to China? I mean, sure, they have 4,000 COVID deaths. Get out of here.
Right.
Like, we're not even on that scale. Like, we bullshit. They lie. There's a huge difference.
Right.
And the fact that Rand Paul was, you know, selling this thing, but is one thing, because of course that's what he's going to say. He's Ron Paul's kid, right? They've always drifted off the idea that we're outsiders that just happen to have seats in government. Like, I don't even understand how those people run for office, because how do you claim that? How do you go, I'm an outsider? I'm an outsider. You've been sitting in office for 16 years.
Maybe they're going by the don't hate the player, hate the game rule. Like, you know, the game's rigged, but I need to play it because that's the way we do. I'm like, ugh. Although you mentioned Trump as Zorro, and I can't help but seeing George Hamilton's version of Zorro as Trump.
The gay blade.
Yes.
Right. The irony is that Trump and Trump's getting long in the tooth. He's getting boring. A lot of his he had massive failures from his sales points that he was going to be the like GOP whisperer come this fall. and then, Purdue eating it so bad, Herschel Walker's going to lose. A lot of the Trump friendlies are having a real hard time. Even MTG's having a hard time raising money. And she was the best fundraiser in the Republican Party last year. She raised more money than any other Republican, which is stunning considering she's in this little pissant Georgia district. Who cares? There's nothing there. This is not one of those districts where you don't realize this is where Dow Chemicals headquarters is, or this is where the NRA's offices are.
But they love her.
That's, because she's a Q and she's a spoiler and she's a mess. They like the idea that, she's a gibberish queen. The problem you have is that in that district, I have no doubt that a Manchin-like Democrat could possibly win.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not going to float one because for all the talk about, the party establishment and the party elite, the AOCs around us would never stand for them running somebody like that in that area.
Right.
They're not going to allow.
I had an argument with somebody on Twitter one time. I've been, maybe I shouldn't waste my time with that, but I was having a discussion with somebody about, trying to, moving things to the left, and in Congress would require, replacing, like a centrist, Republican with like a centrist Democrat or something. And the person I was arguing with had a problem with that because that just makes the Democratic Party more conservative. So it's like they would rather have a more progressive Democratic Party that doesn't have control than on average, less progressive Democratic Party that can control and can get the wins, at least some wins that we need. It's bizarre. I don't understand the line of thinking.
Yeah, it's the logic is that they also have been told at some point that a lot of these talking points that that they could win in those areas if only the establishment would get out of the way. If a Democrat can win in this area, any Democrat can win in this area, and that is not the case.
Right.
Only a certain kind of Democrat can win in that area, and anything shy of that never has a chance. But this kind of goes along with the Bernie Sanders aspect. Bernie had a 30% ceiling. He was never going to clear that nationally. He could run away with the Democratic Party at some point if everything worked perfectly and get the nomination, but he was never going to get more than 30% of the vote nationally. And the weirdest part is that he would end up having to court a big portion of left-leaning independent Occupy crowd, yada yada, that don't vote, that have been talked out of voting by Lee Camp and Jimmy Dore over the time, and because he wasn't willing to, go scorched earth, they already gave up on Bernie. Like the most vicious things I've ever heard said about Bernie Sanders come from his former supporters, which just goes to show you, putting your eggs in their basket is a mistake.
Right.
Yeah.
Apparently some people are talking about something with my moderator in the chat. I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about. I don't have enough attention.
I have no doubt.
Yeah, I don't have enough attention to moderate, and I don't have anybody else who is a moderator in my chat. So there's some weirdness going on in the chat. But hey, chat, how's it going?
It's always an issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I can only hope to be able to eventually get some moderators on to help clean things up, but that's probably a later date. And remember, there's only 58 likes and 104 viewers. There's only 104 viewers and 58 likes, so smash that like button. What'd you say?
Oh, I was saying I've got some lovely moderators, and as my show's grown over time, it's been it's always a learning curve.
Right.
And it's, it's never, every single channel somebody starts on YouTube or Twitch or any of these things is very different from every other one. You can, there's things you can learn certainly, but who your audience is and what they will do, and when is, is sort of up to them. And if you want them to be a real organic audience, a genuine audience, then you just got to be patient with it and let it come naturally.
Right.
If you want these big sock puppet accounts, it's real easy. It's clickbait and just, all or nothing politics and destroy your own party, and off you'll go, man. It's printing money in a week.
Unfortunately, that's not how I roll. So I do notice, see like Andrea Brower and other folks who are moderators on yours are in the chat. So
yeah,
shout out to y'all. Thank y'all for joining. Appreciate y'all.
They'll keep an eye out for trouble for you at the very least. I think they'll let you know if there's somebody needs to batten down the hatches. While you're at it, though, sign up for Nightbot, and that'll do that'll keep the people who just come in and drop, racially insensitive language and grotesque epithets.
Right.
That you can at least have that baseline, which is very helpful.
So I did have an oddball question that I thought of the other day while listening to the show. You ever thought about doing an April Fool's Day show where you did Hal Sparks, MAGA worldwide, and just have Ficus do the whole show?
Yeah, absolutely. The funny thing is that I would have to do it super over the top, or a bunch of my fans would have a vapor lock.
Right.
Like the whole purpose of my show is to help people let off steam and feel better. So it's counter, to my method to try to like genuinely April Fools anybody around that. So it would have to be, cartoonishly big, and I think Ficus would be perfect.
Right.
And even that,
I've had that idea. The conservative show that I listen to in the morning. I was having this idea of telling Jeff. I was like, because I know him, and I was like, hey, why don't you have me come on April 1st and you could just like shock your listeners with the fact that I've taken over the channel, I've taken over the station or the show, and then I'm like, they probably would leave in droves and never come back, not understanding the fact that this is just a joke.
Yeah, they wouldn't look at the calendar. They wouldn't care. They would just have panic attacks and write nasty letters and then threaten everybody.
It would be like the scene in Chappelle's show when they realized that the Klansman was actually Clayton Bigsby, a black guy.
Right. Yes. There's a lot of that going around, and I will say that I am seeing, at least in my I guess I've always seen it in my crowd. But even in like going out to stand-up shows, that I've seen a lot of people starting to lighten up about the stricter aspects of the purity worries that people were having.
Right.
I just don't see myself getting canceled because of a misunderstanding at any time soon. Like I honestly have no problem with being canceled if I genuinely changed who I was and I was saying stuff that was just awful and blah, 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 and it was aimed at my audience and my audience decided to take a walk. That's their right. They can cancel, right? They should be able to go, whatever. But the idea that it could happen because of misunderstanding was an ongoing problem that a lot of, people were worried about. And I just feel like we're moving past that some, which I think is a good thing. We'll see if it sticks, but I think it will, because I think you have a generation of folks that were, coming up in a lot of these issues, and they're watching sort of reality set in of what it takes to make real social change, what's necessary, and that it doesn't happen kind of magically out of nowhere. And I think that's a healthy thing. Everybody, once you realize that, you recognize that there are, limits even still, on your, on your ability to change yourself, much less some stranger that you've been judging way harsher than you would judge who you are and what you stand for. So I'm a fan. I think I have faith in my fellow humans. The odd thing, and I think increasingly, I'm hoping to see a sort of divergence from the TYT model, where my side, while we're not gullible, we can afford to be kind again.
Right.
because that's got to be part of the essence of it. If we're the, forgiving people's foibles and, as far as addiction and stuff like that, or we're, as people, sex positive about sex work and people's, their own gender issues don't have to be worked out for us to respect them, those kind of things. If we stand for those things for real, we also can't be kind of embittered, bossy maniacs who are effectively like moral busybodies with no standard of our own. And I think that's a mistake. So I'm increasingly hopeful that, we're that as people are growing up, literally aging into it, as the millennials and the Zoomers, are graduating college and the like, they're getting a more realistic view of their own lives. And I think that helps, because patience with others and patience with yourself are inextricably linked. And I feel like most people's anxieties that they have is that they're so bitterly unforgiving to strangers that they become bitterly unforgiving of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just becomes a brutal, experience for them. Everything they do is wrong. Everything is worry. Everything is pain. And I just feel like that's, it's unfair to the rest of humanity, and it's unfair to yourself.
Right. And like I try and I always try and be like, when it comes to like dealing with folks, like one of my most favorite listeners, and one of my person who's probably the biggest supporter of the show is somebody who, we disagree on some stuff, and he's probably he voted for Biden because he wasn't Trump and not because he supports Biden and everything. Right. And like, so I definitely don't demand like ideological purity, and I do think that people need to, from all sides, need to realize like what the threat is, and that we all need to stand together. The only problem with that is sometimes when people do start acting bad and start acting badly, and do things like, I try not to pick on the Young Turks that much, but when she called Biden sleepy, I was like, no, you have to draw a line somewhere, and you have to be able to tell your allies that, hey, you're doing this wrong, and we need to do better, and there should be room within allyship. If you're on the same general side, there should be room to give that criticism and to accept that criticism, because I used to be a terrible person when it came to accepting criticism before. I've tried to do better now. I try to, if somebody gives me a criticism, instead of just knee-jerk reacting, I kind of just sit back and let it marinate, and like, well, why was this thing said to me, and then try to figure it out. There's a lot of times when I have this I started a video series. I haven't worked on it in a bit, but it's like coming to terms with activism, where I talk about terms used in activism, and people get like a reaction like, what, jargon, ridiculous, all the jargon that you hear. And I was like, like one of the things I heard one time was like, fragile masculinity, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, and like immediately I realized, oh, the fact I couldn't handle the fact that masculinity was being called fragile, and I acted badly to it, thus proving the fragility that they were trying to talk about in the first place. So, kind of one of the things, the overlying themes that I would have in some of the videos that I've made, and I need to make more, is that, when you hear something that seems jarring to your worldview, don't go with that gut, like, oh my God, reaction. Sit, let it marinate, think about it, and try and understand what the other person might have been talking about, and as such, you can perhaps get a better understanding, and either you'll come to it yourself, or you'll be in a better place where you might have better, more constructive questions to ask. And so at the end of the day, you can have a better feeling as to why the other people are saying what they're saying. And you might not always agree, but at least you have a better understanding, and you have it, and you've done so in a nice and in a civil way, instead of an argumentative, toxic way. And right. I think that's the way I've kind of learned to deal with the things that I might not understand, but I'm more likely to understand now that I give it time. So a lot of the times, when people, either to the left or to the right of me say things that I don't initially agree with, I just take the step back and be like, okay, let's chill. But of course, sometimes it's just too much, and you have to say something.
Sure. Well, I think, I think it's better to live within a space where you recognize who you are and where you're working towards, your ethical failings and successes, what you're trying to do or whatever, and then you will automatically hear what other people say through that lens.
Right.
Nobody who is genuinely smart, studies, considers things, achieved a doctorate or whatever, or those kind of things, and done the actual work, worries about it when someone calls them stupid randomly.
Right.
You don't get, you're not on your heels about that all the time, nor should you be. So to me, I just kind of live like that all the time. So it's sort of a walking meditation. I don't really feel like I have to even respond to those kind of criticisms as long as my main response is, am I living up to my standards? And if my answer is yes, then their criticism is based on something else or is simply just an ideological difference. And ideological differences I'm completely comfortable with.
Right.
Because I've done some work working it through. And I also know that life is often made up of the next best thing. That you are doing your best with what's available, not with what, should in the world. Because I think as Tony Robbins used to say, you end up shoulding all over yourself.
Right.
And that's something we have to recognize, I think, as people going forward. And all of the manipulative social media stuff we hear about that the Russian troll farms are doing, all this stuff is meant to drive a wedge on purpose. All of that stuff is designed specifically to get people to be unforgiving and to not listen and to talk at cross purposes using jargon.
Right.
But that's how you do it. That's how you freeze people in place. Is you Tower of Babel them. You scatter them across the globe and you confound their language so they may not understand each other. And that's a terrible way to operate. It's, and if the most important thing is your jargon, then you care more about how you communicate something than that you communicate something. And that's always our, as humans, that's a constant and never-ending struggle.
Very true. And sometimes I do find that, especially on our side, on the left wing of the political spectrum, that a lot of times, too many times, we will fight. Even though we agree on 95% of the stuff, we fight over the 9%, and cause that to just ruin things that we want to work on. When sometimes you just got to be like, accept the fact we're not going to agree on that 5%, but here's this other 95% that we absolutely agree on. Let's work on that together.
Well, yeah, the other aspect is that how serious is the problem? Because the more unforgiving and frozen in place you are, quite frankly, the less solution-oriented you will be, and therefore it's more of a game to you.
Right.
It's more about, staying on teams, not going off sides, painting within the lines, and sticking to the rules of the Super Bowl than it is about, actually winning, actually solving a crisis. If you're treating a flood like team sports and you're trying to save people from drowning, that just says to me you're more concerned about how you look in the situation than how the actual, saving people goes.
Right.
It's, and that's the crucial thing. To me, it's really always been about how do you help as many people as possible, and as quickly as possible, because the quicker, especially if it's a very serious problem, because triaging people in these circumstances is incredibly important, because then those people can get to helping other people. That spread, that success and function matrix spreads on and on the more people you help immediately. If you're just waiting for the big day to save everybody, you're doing it alone, or at least feeling like you are, or dwindling your resources instead of setting people free as you come upon them and then allowing those people to join in with you.
Right.
And that's one of the problems with the all or nothing setup, is that, these people end up like feeling out, anxious and outmatched because they don't have any friends. They don't have any support structure. The group that they're in is dwindling. The meetings start getting smaller and smaller. Nobody seems to care. a big part of that is simply because, you won't, take the wins as they come.
Yeah. And everybody could probably do a much better job of taking the wins as they come. I know I'm working on that myself personally. I know, like, a lot of times I'm very good at giving other people advice, and I'm very bad at taking my own advice.
Sure.
But
That's a common problem.
Tim Farrell in the chat says, great analogy, Hal. I'm not sure which analogy that was, but he says you made a great analogy, so just wanted to let you know.
Oh, right on. Well,
So,
thank you. It's one of as a comedian, I feel like I'm in the analogy business.
Right.
That's it's kind of what we comedy is bad analogies and bad similes that turn out to be right.
Right.
That's the honest response. Yeah. So,
that's true. I mean, a lot of stuff.
I think there's a reality to, sometimes you got to stick to your guns in terms of, what you're trying to accomplish and see it through. But a lot of people try that strategy without ever making the initial success, which is really wonky. You know what I mean? Like it's not even a winning strategy. And again, what they take as a winning strategy, and in some Democratic circles, and Trump is doing the exact same mistake, is turning blue districts bluer, and Trump's trying to turn red districts redder. He's trying to move all these people that on for all practical purposes should be regular run-of-the-mill Republicans, and then he boots them out in a primary with somebody who's super MAGA, ultra MAGA, or whatever, and then they're going to lose the general.
Right.
They're going to, they're done.
Georgia.
And that's because
Abrams might win Georgia.
Georgia's a great example.
He managed to.
Thank God.
Yeah, he managed to split that Republican vote up, and he's so against. I don't even get why he's against Kemp, because it's not like Kemp worked against him, but his ego is too fragile to deal with the fact that Kemp wouldn't keep fighting.
Still got a chip on his shoulder about.
Yeah.
It's just because if you're selling the idea that that there was that it was rigged, and you have to believe that, or you're gonna or you have to admit you lost to Sleepy Joe,
right?
Which is the biggest pain of his life. It's far easier to just go against anybody who wasn't with you is against you, and that's enough. That's all you're gonna need. That's all he's got. He's just you're with us or against this because it sounds tough, right?
Right.
It sounds a lot better than we need to work together and build coalitions and da-da-da. I mean, that sounds gay and female from his standpoint. You know what I mean? That's how they react to stuff. Manly man doesn't do that. That's not how manly man works. It's just it's idiocy, but it's all he's got. It's all he's got. And there's and we should be very lucky. We are very lucky. We should count ourselves as very lucky that that's exactly what's going on, because
and hopefully that continues.
If you want a recipe for losing, that's it, and that's all Trump has ever done his whole life is lose. Even winning the presidency was a loss for him.
Right.
It's going to be the biggest mistake of his life.
Right. He when he won, he was like, there needs to be counts in this state because I didn't win by enough. Like, they should not count these votes because I think I should have won California. Like, really, dude? Like,
well, that goes to my theory that he actually bought lots of votes during the last election, that all the fraud they're finding is him, and that he paid for it because he thought he was going to win the Electoral College again because he thought that was a ringer, and so he wanted to boost the popular vote so he wouldn't be embarrassed with the second round. And that is the reason why the only people saying we don't want to recount, we don't want to look, don't pay any attention to what happened during the election are Republicans, because they helped him do it and they don't want to get busted.
Right.
You're like, dude, you can't look in there. Why? Well, because that's where all the fake Trump votes are hidden.
Exactly.
They'll find all the Biden votes. We removed the real Biden voters who really voted. We burned all those. That's the room where all the ash is. And if they, do a forensic look at them, they're going to notice that those are, real ballots. So I honestly think like he thought they could do this little bit like trickle vote all over the country, minor fraud everywhere would boost him up, and they just committed to it. That's my theory, because nothing else makes sense. Because why is a Republican in any of these areas where he thinks there were shenanigans going on, would you not want them to look? And why does he specifically know where it all took place and almost by the numbers?
Right.
Well, it's because he paid for it. He's got the receipt, to borrow, to paraphrase Bill Hicks.
Right. Find me 1,300 votes in Georgia so I can win.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's, and the reason it wasn't, he's not going to get prosecuted in Georgia because by that point he has a plausible deniability as just being an idiot.
Right.
Because everywhere he talked, he was like, it was stolen from me. There's like 100,000 votes. And he's going, I was saying just find me 17,800 because I know there's 100,000. I don't need you to find all of them. I just need to win the election, and we could sort the other ones that were stolen from me out later. That's going to be his defense, and it will work because it's all in your head, and nobody can tell him any different.
Well, one of my favorite things is like when the Trump supporters don't believe, like, how could Biden win because he was campaigning from his basement, and I'm like, that's really more embarrassing for Trump now, is it? He lost to somebody who spent most of the campaign.
Well, and also we were all in our basements, dummy.
Right. Well,
we were all at home.
At least the responsible ones were. The irresponsible ones were going to Sturgis or going to Trump rallies. Going to
sure. Well, later on in the process.
Going to
but
Tulsa.
Not right. Not right out of the gate. In the beginning, there was the lockdowns were fairly consistent because Trump was still president and his own people were buying some of it, even though they were like anti-Fauci lunatics.
Right.
They were still committed as best they could to the idea that he knew what he was doing, he was in control, and all this kind of stuff. It's amazing to me how many of these idiots do this whole thing about how Trump is a leader. He's the only guy who's done everything that he should ever do, and you'd always do, and he's the greatest ever guy because he's the real leader, and nobody else can tell him what to do. And then you're like, well, why did all the lockdowns happen when he was president? And they're like, yeah, that's because Fauci made him. And like, all right,
Fauci made him.
Okay, dumb.
Yeah, Fauci didn't make him.
He just quit it.
But even then,
yeah,
though, he's on tape, saying that he downplayed the virus, and I always said during especially the end of his presidency that we should all have diabetes because Donald Trump liked to sugarcoat things so much, but he wanted to make everything look better because everything is a salesman pitch to him. He wants you to buy his new scam, so you have to believe that it's the best thing possible.
He's a condo salesman.
Right.
Yeah, he's a condo salesman. Like, none of this really matters. And if he doesn't make the sales because you're an idiot or you didn't really have the money in the first place, any of that shit.
Right.
Like, and again, that's why he's a loser. That's why he always loses. He just does. It's what he does. It's how he does it.
Nobody's better at losing than me. I'm the best. I'm the best loser.
Right. Well,
there's
an argument for that.
Right.
Yeah. This is a strategy, that has worked for him in New York that just did not farm out. If you have an analogous life, that system is just not going to work everywhere. It just isn't. And that's something that's difficult for somebody like him to recognize, that the system set up in New York, which protected all the real estate developers and the Russian money and all that stuff, doesn't work in the rest of the country. It just doesn't. It can't, because there's too many moving parts. New York has a very specific setup. It's manipulable,
right.
and can still look like a big win. The rest of the country it's too porous, and that was the problem that he had. Was that everywhere he turned around, there was somebody who, didn't like what he said by a little bit in a way that he'd never experienced before in his kind of semi-charmed second generation rich kid life. He's not used, he wasn't watch when he's asked a follow-up question.
Right.
like he calls people wise guys and jerks and all that kind of stuff simply because they asked him a question, he didn't answer it, and then they asked him again. I did a Stuart Varney interview that we had seen before, but I hadn't seen the top of it today, and Varney kept asking him, like, what would you do different than what Biden is doing? And he was like, well, it would have never happened, and I know that it would have never happened, and it's a fact that it never would have happened. And
many people are saying,
what would you have done differently? Yeah, everybody knows that Putin, I don't know, something's changed there, but this is an atrocity. And
right,
and however many dead they say there are, there's always going to be more. It's going to be worse and more terrible, but it never would have happened if I was there. And that's that. And then, but ultimately, again, it's like, how did that happen? How in the world, did you, like, what would you do different? What is it? Name one thing you would do different. He went to, we've got to send drones in because we've got great drones. And then Biden needs to, quote, mix it up when he's talking to Putin and mention nukes because we have them too. Like, so that's your plan. Ratchet up the threat of nuclear war.
Right.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's just, it's childish. I mean, the man is a toddler. The amazing thing, though, is how many of his followers, as desperate as they are, for a hero, I mean, he's really on a hot fade. They're having a hard time. They're trying to rally behind DeSantis, but DeSantis is such a dweeb.
Right.
That he's not, Trump's a dweeb too, but at least he's a second generation rich dweeb.
Right.
That was the thing. And it's stunning to me that anybody thinks he's going to run again or that it's going to be a real thing, because he's so not.
Right.
He's so not. But I enjoy watching them flail about, and it's increasingly, if that's who they want to back, my thing is like, by God, if you think he's going to run or he's worth it, please, please, please give him all of your money,
right,
and dedicate every dime you have to getting him reelected, because none of the money going to his super PAC, none of it is going to Republicans anywhere else. Like, it's not going to the Senate, it's not going to the House, it's not going into any of these areas. And so good. Let him spend it paying his golf bills and all this kind of crap.
Right. Paying off his loans to Deutsche Bank or whatever.
It's exactly what he's doing. And I'm for it. Yeah.
But one of the things though that with the whole Russia thing though is that, and you've said what I've been saying too, and I think we may have come upon it independently or whatever, but it's the idea that why does he not think that Putin would have attacked? Because he didn't have to. Putin didn't attack Ukraine in the 4 years that Trump was president because Trump gave him everything he wanted. He ceded power in the Middle East. He weakened NATO.
He was stiff-arming NATO. He's trying to dislodge Germany by saying, you guys are beholden to Russia for oil, so you better rethink it because you're going to have to surrender to them, because all that tough talk was even about driving a wedge between NATO and Germany,
right?
And even in many ways, and worse, if once the Ukraine invasion started, there was no way the kind of aid that they're getting from the Biden administration and the American people would have come in. He would have just used it as an excuse.
Right.
Like, it would have been done. He would have just looked. And there's a talk about how initially how China saw how it would be for them to take Taiwan, which was, it'd be this overwhelming attrition thing that would happen in a couple of days. They would just surround and blockade the place, pour soldiers in everywhere, basically arrest almost every Taiwanese citizen that wouldn't go along with it.
Right.
And then by the time the rest of the world stood up and found out what had happened, it was already there. And so we'd moved to diplomacy because they've got nukes and we've got factories there.
Right.
That's what their thought was. That's not how it's going to shake out. It's not what's going to happen. That said, and they now know that in watching what happened in, with Ukraine. That said, that was the plan to some degree with Trump and Putin was that if without the United States pushing all this aid in and realigning NATO and getting everybody on board, and there is no success for Ukraine. Kiev would have been taken. I mean, that's why they thought they could,
right?
Because they bought the Sleepy Joe nonsense.
Right.
They bought that storyline.
Yeah, they call him Sleepy Joe. They also call him like Beijing Biden, like what the journalists do. It's always sleepy, whatever, Beijing Biden. And I'm like, they're always criticizing him for being in Biden, for being in China's pocket, being in China. China's the biggest threat. China's a bigger threat than Russia. You know, Biden is too hooked up with China. Then the moment Biden says something about, well, we would defend Taiwan if they went after Taiwan. The same conservatives are now like, well, should we really be talking about that? We have problems at home. We shouldn't be getting involved in that conflict. We shouldn't do all that. That's more. I mean, it's like they need to make up their minds, but they won't because their mind is just oppose anything Biden does.
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with they're actually giving a crap about any of those issues. It's about retaining power in the United States because the United States is the biggest economy on earth.
Right.
It is, we by twice as much. Like we are the number 2 economy in the world is China, allegedly. By the way, increasingly I find their numbers to be bullshit. They're bad now, anyways, but they're getting worse all the time. And our economy is $26 trillion by GDP. Right. 24 is considered a drawback for us. Like Russia's is 1.4. China's is 11, and it's on its way down. That's why people are fighting tooth and nail and are so brutal about, winning over control of the United States, because the amount of power you even have as a podunk Georgia congressperson is greater than some heads of state in other countries. Right. As far as the control resources you have, I mean, it's not even close. So, I mean, it's never any surprise to me that, that everybody's fighting for this, for a piece of, of America in that regard while crap talking it. The irony, though, is that it bites them in the butt because it's bad for the stock market, it's bad for the market, and it's bad for business overall if you keep talking the market down, if you keep talking the country down. And they, that's a real issue for them, on the Republican side, because, Trump's like, we're, this whole, like, our country's going to hell nonsense, when in reality, if that was true, then in 2 years it'll be decimated, clearly. So what are we even talking about? You can't salvage it. And he's even his tone is so extreme that there is no end game. There is no version where America is fixable once it comes back.
Well, I mean, I don't think they really want. I mean, they so hate, like, so many people who are Americans. Like, I mean, I posed this question to the conservative show. I was like, look, if you had your option, you could choose between having a fair election where everybody votes, but every single person who is eligible to vote does vote, and every vote is 100% valid, or you could have Donald Trump be dictator for life. Which would you choose? And of course, the host was like, I'm going to choose the voting, but I think most of the voters would probably be like, I'll take Trump as dictator for life. I'd rather that. I'd rather that than risking a Democrat being in control.
Because the liberals they're gonna rig the election anyways, right? That's right. Again, once you convince people that who the enemy is, you can just maintain that forever. You can just, anything you do is justified. We talk a lot about how, like, people will dehumanize minorities, for example, in this country, and in an attempt to wipe them out. Like the Germans did with Jews. There's been a concerted effort in this country against this country, I would argue, by, foreign actors and some internalized actors over time, to convince the American people that the biggest enemy they have is the government. That's your biggest threat is going to be the government, and they've taken it to heart. It's not even like, the reason it's the biggest threat you have is the government is because you really, as an American, don't live in a world of threat.
Right.
That, you know what I mean? It's kind of an argument about
insulated
domestic
from everything
terrorism
else on the outside that we can't see the threats that the government protects us from.
Right, and nor should we.
Right.
And quite frankly, take so much of it for granted, from just food safety to to the idea that foreign terrorists try all the time to do awful, and for all the times that if they've gotten through spectacularly, they have not killed people on the numbers like they did on 9/11 since, and they certainly haven't done it in terms of like volume of human beings. Like like you would see in Yemen or something like that, where people just in general like are constantly dying, just constant. Is like if you listen to Republicans, it sounds like they're the Palestinians.
Right.
that's how they talk about everything, and that there's no escape, except for revolution. And there's a bunch of, by the way, like Republicans who buy this kind of story, but there's a bunch of them who just kind of like yeah, and then they kind of shake it off as a concept. But in reality, they you have to push back hard against an idea like that. You can't just go, nah, well, I see what you're saying, but they're like, no, you talk like that. That means the response has to be equal to the threat, and that gets really dangerous real fast.
Right. Well, sometimes people do have a hard time pushing back on things, even when they should, and I'm guilty of that myself. One time, just the other day, I was talking about this before you came on. My AC guy, is really reliable, very good. We can call on him, and he can come fix it whenever he can, and he's reasonable. He never tries to, give us, cheap labor or oversell us and everything. But then, like, after the work was done the other day, all of a sudden he starts talking about, how he just heard about this new thing that he thinks he's going to do. It's the whole sovereign citizen movement, and he also has, heard all of how Ivermectin's really good for you. And I'm like, oh my God, like, do I tell this guy how stupid he's being and lose the good AC guy, or do I just kind of sit here and absorb it and slowly let my mind explode?
Well, yeah, obviously the issue with a lot of these, he sounds kind of late to the game, quite frankly. But a lot of the folks that, buy into this stuff, it's less about what they've come to believe and in a positive sense, but that like doors have been closed around them. Like, okay, out that door is a wolf.
Right.
Out that door is a wolf. Out that door is a wolf. So the only door without a wolf behind it is Trump. And like, if I want to escape this horror, he's my only hope.
Right.
And that's a crazy place to find yourself in, literally and figuratively.
Yes.
And I don't know how, there's some people you're never going to peel back from this. And then there's a bunch of people who are, I would say, I call bullshit on it. They genuinely don't believe it, but it's useful for them to play footsie with. And there's a ton of Republican Congress people that do that. And you could argue that there's on the left side of things, there are people who talk the talk of left-wing politics, because right. If you don't say the jargon, you won't get reelected. But their approach is a lot more, normie,
right?
In theory, because without it, they won't actually get reelected. But their choices between like being completely genuine, and a Republican takes over the district, which I would say is the sort of the trap that Obama found himself in about gay marriage. He supported the idea 100%. However, he, everybody around him knew that the minute you say you're for gay marriage, you are currently unelectable.
Right.
Time moves, attitudes change, and the reality is the country was not there yet. So meanwhile, Biden comes out and goes, nope, I'm for gay marriage, and almost blows it for everybody is the joke by being honest, by, being truthful in this situation. And that was the concern. Like, dude, you're going to keep us from getting elected by telling the truth. Well, there's a bunch of people who are like, well, telling the truth is more important than winning. Not in this case. Not when losing the person who's going to get in will stop gay people from being able to get married and see their partner in the hospital if they, God forbid, are dying of AIDS or cancer or some terminal illness.
Right.
It's a terrible idea.
Because, I always talk about the Lisa Pond case that happened in Florida, I think it was, where, they had all the legal paperwork where, power of attorney and everything, and they thought they dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's, but when it came time to their partners wanting to see the one in the hospital, they were not allowed to. Why? Because they weren't married. So it was just,
Right.
And they didn't, and that's why you needed to have, that's why you can't stop short of equality.
Right.
But again, sometimes the right thing isn't always the popular thing. And if you want to get the right thing done, sometimes you gotta, let it come when it's going to come, and then support it behind the scenes instead of supporting it, instead of being so vocal over the top about it.
Sometimes you got to slow walk the public into an opinion they already have. What they really are against is the story they've been sold about that it's dangerous or that it'll be the end of heterosexual marriage or blah blah blah.
We're going to want to marry dogs now. That's still coming up. The whole wanting to marry their animals thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, people marry their car or whatever, and like that. I mean, you can. What the thing they don't realize about marriage versus like civil unions or whatever is that the government's in civil unions business,
right?
And marriage is a matter of opinion. It's a religious thing for most people, but you don't have to be religious to say you're married. So obviously, it's a placeholder for the word for permanently adjoined couples.
Right.
That said,
supposedly
that gives you a lot of wiggle room. Yeah, I mean, and so using the phrase married or whatever and saying it diminishes the word married because these people are married and now married doesn't mean as much. Well, then if Britney Spears can get married in Vegas and then get unmarried 2 days later, simmer down.
Right.
Like the minute Elvis started marrying people in Vegas, or fake Elvis started marrying people in Vegas, that died. What marriage means to you, in this circumstance, clearly is this belief that, if in front of God and man, you guys have declared you're a couple and you're planning on staying that way till death do you part, and that either has meaning for you or it does not.
Right.
And in my, and the more people who view it as that standard, the stronger that standard gets. So gay marriage reinforces the concept of marriage in its purest form. The more people you have who are getting married because they mean to spend their entire lives together. Technically divorce is the enemy of marriage, not more people who want to get married.
Right.
So an absurd fight we've been through that they would like to relitigate.
Right.
The Republicans would like to go, no. It just means one man, one woman.
Some of them want to relitigate Loving versus Virginia. I mean, it's crazy. My joke was if because I was concerned about all of the rulers that even though Alito said no, these ones aren't going to be touched. It doesn't mean they're going to be touched. I'm like, they're going to be touched because you mentioned them. And then my one main conservative listener in the chat was like, well, Thomas won't support overturning Loving because that would then end his marriage. I'm like, that's assuming he wants to stay married. He might want to overturn Loving so his marriage can get dissolved, so he doesn't have to give his wife half.
Right. Well, yeah. Sorry, babe. We legally aren't married under the law, so I don't have to pay alimony because everything we did was, violation of the Constitution.
Right. Although it's possible with all of her deals she does with all those right-wing media groups, all the deals she does with right-wing media groups and stuff, she might actually have more money than he does. She might bring more to the table at this point, money-wise.
Right. Yeah. I mean, however, she's also a lunatic.
True.
So, I genuinely she's one of those people where beyond just her being a true believer, she's got that kind of crazy-eyed church lady energy, and that's got to get tired sometimes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's, like, it's one of those things where you're like, yeah, no amount of money is worth this. This is lunacy.
That's a good point. Then again, he is kind of covering for her by not wanting to have, by not recusing himself from those cases where she could potentially be involved. So,
well, that's the assumption that he isn't as well.
Right. Well, I'm sure
because he very well may be.
True.
That might be the concern, is that he's worried that he's going to get, he's going to get busted right along with her, and so, and again, yet another reason for Loving to not be overturned, because he has to stay married to her, so she can't testify against him. She can't be forced to testify against him, because wives can't be forced to testify against their husbands.
That's a very good point.
Like, he knows the law, even though he's terrible at it.
Right.
So that's the theory, anyways. I have to sign off because I got to go join the fam. So appreciate you having me on.
Oh, again, always, I've told you, I said, and the last Wednesday of the month can be yours every month, unless you're not busy. Unless you're busy that day, then we can always work something else out. So
sounds like a party. I like it.
Yes, awesome. Last Wednesday of the month is Hal Sparks Day. So again, thank you so much. Nice. Enjoy the family.
Sure.
Hal Sparks, Mega Worldwide, infotainmentwars.com. You can, if you sub to him on many different places. You have a Patreon. You can sub to his YouTube channel. You can also sub to your Twitch, right?
Right.
And if you're like me and have a Prime account, I went ahead and subbed to you both on YouTube and Twitch, because apparently on Prime you can sub for using your Prime membership that way, so that ups your subs as well.
Yeah, you get one Prime sub per month for free, so it doesn't cost you anything if you use it. It's the rolling phrase is if you use Prime, it doesn't cost you a dime.
Right.
I think that's adorable.
That's very cute. Until I get my nerdydan.com Twitch channel up, I'll encourage everybody to send their Prime your way.
I think that's wise. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, have a great night, and I appreciate you having me on.
You as well. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thanks. Okay. Bye.
Everybody, that was, again, Hal Sparks, infotainmentwars.com, Hal Sparks, Mega Worldwide. Watch him on YouTube almost daily, unless he's doing something else. And shout out again to all of the sparklers, jalapenos, or whatever other label you feel comfortable with in supporting the Hal Sparks radio program for joining me here. If you haven't subscribed here yet, please remember to do so. Smash that like button, hit that subscribe, and share. Just watch some of our other videos when you have the time. You can listen to it in the background. I think one of my best ones is my Life as a Fat Person that I did about last October, I think it was. I'm about to start coughing again, so I'm gonna take my second commercial break real quick. Come back, we can finish up the show, and we'll if anybody wants to call in, it's 914-803-4131. That's 914-803-4131. To all the ones leaving right now, again, thank you so much for joining us. It really helps the show. Be back in a second with more Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left. That's right.
Greetings. This is Nimbus Yosh, host of the Percy Podcast. What is the Percy Podcast? Well, it's pretty much the smoothest talking host you'll ever hear in your life, talking about all kinds of things. Political things, nerdy things, fun things, not so fun things. Go ahead, give a listen, and follow at the Percy Podcast for more updates and information. Why not sit back and take a listen to one of the best podcasts you'll ever hear, and no one else will. Catch you on the tunes.
Do you want to set money aside for a rainy day? Do you want to open an account that will give you a savings bonus each month? What if I told you that you can get both and have a chance to win $10 million? Yada is an FDIC-insured bank, and when you go to yada.liberaldan.com, open an account, and make your first deposit, you will get 100 entries into the next weekly drawing. You will also get entries each week you have a balance. So go to yada.liberaldan.com. That's YOTTA.liberaldan.com. Using gerrymandering, voter suppression, and other nefarious tactics, the Republican Party has manipulated our electoral system to maintain as much control as possible despite being a party in the minority. Liberal Dan Radio seeks to change that, and I need your help in doing so. Liberal Dan Radio has partnered with Levelfield to help us use tools that are typically only available to big money donors. When you go to stopthecoup.liberaldan.com and make your contribution, it will encourage other voters to reach out to their legislators to pass legislation to stop gerrymandering and voter suppression, and target elected officials who refuse to protect the vote. Every eligible voter should be able to cast a ballot, and that ballot should have the same power as everyone else. I can't do this alone. I need your help. So please go to stopthecoup.liberaldan.com and make your contribution today. That's stopthecoup.liberaldan.com. stopthecoup.liberaldan.com. Political advertising paid for by Levelfield. Contributions are not tax deductible as charitable contributions.
And welcome back to Liberal Dan Radio, talk from the left, that's right. This is your host, Dan Zimmerman, coming at you from New Orleans, Louisiana. To join the show, it's 914-803-4131, or join us in either the chat room on blogtalkradio.com/liberaldan or youtube.com/liberaldanradio. If you happen to be listening after the live broadcast, you can also leave your comments on the thread at liberaldan.com, facebook.com/liberaldan, or at liberaldanradio on Twitter, or of course come to YouTube and leave your comments in the thread there as we're here as well. So we were talking a little bit about, I would love to be able to have Hal video speaking, just video chat through it, and I'm a technical guy, so I'm trying to figure this out. But I have almost a master's degree in computer science. So if it's possible, I should be able to eventually figure out how to do it. I really like the Blog Talk Radio setup in that I have just a bank of sound clips that I can play whenever I feel like playing them. That's why you'll eventually hear me playing. Where is it? This one.
It is what it is.
Just readily available for me. I'm sure I could also do that on YouTube if I may, just a soundboard or use some other tool that might give the opportunity to have a soundboard like that. So that I need to look into that, see about some Streamlabs or some of the other things that people use to send streams out to multiple places. I just don't know if I could be able to. The key is being able to route. If he's coming in with like a Skype chat, to be able to route the sound from the Skype chat through into the Blog Talk Radio without having it then come back around and without then having it come back around and whatchamacallit, and then giving us repeating sound of feedback over and over again. I guess possibly what you could do is have him call with the phone and then have his video up there and not have the sound coming through, and just video chat for the video and then audio phone for the audio chat like some people do with Zoom. I don't know. We'll work it out sometimes. Let's see. Hide in the shadows. 5-party system needed. Carl Smith didn't realize it's a live radio show. Yes, it's a live radio show. This is live. You can call in. That's the other part that I like about Blog Talk Radio is that I do have a phone number that you can call on. Usually don't give the phone number out when I have a guest, especially like Hal. Me and Hal just like to talk so much that I don't know if there's room for another person talking at the time. But yeah, I do have a phone number with Blog Talk Radio that I can utilize and treat it as if it's a call-in show. So that's one of the added features that I have with Blog Talk Radio. But let's see. A 5-party system needed according to Hide Shadows. I don't know how I would implement a 5-party system with the way that it's set up, because if you ended up not having anybody get the presidency, like in the go around, if nobody gets a majority of the electoral votes, then it goes to the House of Representatives, and each state, that's ultimately what Trump wanted, was it for the election to be tossed out and for the Congress to have to vote on a state-by-state basis. So it's the House voting for it, but each delegation votes as one. So then whoever gets the most votes there of the candidates then wins. And because there's more red states than blue states, that's the way that Trump would win. So our system isn't really built for main parties. I mean, you do have, Bernie Sanders is Democratic Socialist. You have people who are Green Party. You have independent people who run and then caucus, like Sanders and I forget the other person. But you do have, but there's really not, basically in America, how it's always happened is you've had one party kind of rise up and kind of replace the other party. But as that's happening, you end up giving the other party that's not having competition a lot of say at that point in time. So, that's fine, Carl. I just wanted to, I don't want to get too technical. Some people get bored with the technical stuff, but, being the geeky nerd that I am, and I want to figure that out. I'd love to be able to have the face up there, but there's just drawbacks to doing things differently and to different ways. So I want to figure out what gives the best experience to everybody involved. I used to show the chat streaming up in here, but I was like, if you're watching on YouTube, you don't need to see the chat on the screen because it's there next to it as the chat is scrolling as you're watching it. So, you don't really need that. And as we've moved the show onto YouTube, because it wasn't always on YouTube for a while, the old episodes of Liberal Dan Radio are only available on either Blog Talk Radio or if you search like your podcasts, like Spotify or whatever other podcasts you use. Older shows are just purely audio, no video whatsoever. So there's that. I was going to talk about something else. That was an interesting thing I saw. I wasn't able to gather up all the sound clips for it, but there was a rant that Bill. Did anybody in the chat see Bill Maher's rant on how the trans things has gone too far? And he was talking about how people are just going too far with it, and I'm like, and he just had a lot of. I responded to it, or at least I quoted to it on my Twitter handle. If you don't follow Liberal Dan Radio on Twitter, do so as well. If you want to see my tweets that I have, you have. And there was this video that he had, a little clip, and he starts talking about how it's like too much, too much stuff with I guess trans folk. And I'm like, but the numbers, the data that he was saying was like, some data said that 20% of all Americans, according to some study, identify as LGBTQA+. And fine, but then he was taking that on as saying that 20% of people are trans. I'm like, no, that's not what that's saying. Because you could be not cisgender, and you could also, be in a lesbian, gay, or bisexual relationship. So the idea that all of those 20% are also trans, he just got it completely wrong. And John Deff, I used to love Bill Maher. I used to watch Politically Incorrect. I used to watch Real Time with Bill Maher. It was like, if I couldn't watch it, I would record it. I'd try and watch it live all the time. One of my favorite jokes from him, I think, was, how did we know that George Bush was not behind 9/11? It's like, because it worked. They were successful in doing what they wanted to do, so it couldn't have been George Bush behind it, because obviously it was so inept. But Bill Maher just basically got to a point where it's just like, enough of it already. It's he sounds like just the people who doesn't want to see everybody's point of view and just gets tired of dealing with everybody. And it's like, sometimes you have to deal with everybody if you want to get along, especially if you want to do things like, beat the Republicans. Like, as I said during when I was on, do you really want to fight over the 5% that we disagree on, or do you want to work together on the 95%? Now, if the 5% we disagree on is you're a Nazi and I'm Jewish, no, then I can't get beyond that 5%. It's not going to happen. If, there are some weird leftist progressives who also are anti-Semitic for some reason, and it's very weird. And no, I can't work with those people because the anti-Semitism just goes too far, clearly, because raised Jewish and whatever. But some of those people, you just have to okay, I'm not going to work with you at all. Let's see. Grumpy Cat. Unfortunately, I did see the Mar clip. Yeah, it goes on for a while. I was thinking about capturing the audio, but with my main job at the moment, I just have, my career, I guess, at the moment, I don't like calling it a job because I like working at the place. It's not just a job. I mean, eventually there's the possibility, of, if this were to take off and become my full-time thing and I could do this 5 times a week and just devote my time to making videos, that would be the dream. But I'm keeping my feet firmly planted in reality at this point because, I'm still not even at the point where I'm monetizable on YouTube yet. So once we get there, then we can start climbing that ladder. And we'll see. It would be a nice to have, but it's not necessarily something I'm relying on for at this point for my career. I think Bill is trying to be George Carlin. Yeah, but George Carlin, I think Bill Maher would be the type of person that would say, all jokes should be fair game. And where George Carlin, there's a clip going where he was on Larry King, and George Carlin's like, look, comedians have always been about, according to Carlin at least, attacking people of power, attacking the power structures, and not punching the folks who are marginalized. And he was saying that in an old Larry King clip. So that was an old, I think it was referring to like things that Andrew Dice Clay would do in his type of humor. That, I'll admit, when I was 13 years old, I thought Andrew Dice Clay was super duper funny, and now I understand why 13-year-old me thought that Andrew Dice Clay was super duper funny, but there's lots of stuff that just now I look back at it and I'm like, ugh. Just no. Let's see, do you think he really believes half the stuff he spews or just shows up and reads the cards and gets paid? Club Random is disappointing. I haven't seen a guest yet. Wanted to watch. I don't know what Club Random is. Am I missing something? Let's see, rule number 1, don't punch down. Yeah, I mean, and there's examples of humor, like you could make, there's a difference between racial humor and racist humor. But sometimes it's such a fine line that you don't want to risk it. I used to say I make fun of everybody, but I don't, I tend to not make fun. Like if again, I'm a big guy. I'm overweight. I'm working on it, but I'm overweight. I personally can handle somebody telling a fat joke if it's funny. If it's said to be funny, I'll laugh at it. And if it's said to be funny, if it actually is funny, I'll laugh at it. But there are a lot of times when people tell fat jokes, they're not saying it to be funny. They're saying it to be mean. I mean, just go to my TikTok if you have TikTok. I know Hal doesn't like TikTok, but if you see, I deal with lots of people on TikTok who are just horribly make fat jokes at people's expenses. And when you're making, jokes at people's expenses, that's the problem. That being said, I don't speak for all fat people either. I don't speak for all people who are overweight. And there are plenty of people who won't laugh at any fat joke, or at least any fat joke coming from somebody who isn't themselves fat, because they're going to view it as hateful, and then that's their right too, and they're valid in thinking that way. So a lot of times you will see people who will just say, look, just to play it safe, don't punch down, always attack power. There's plenty of stuff to laugh at of the people in power where you don't need to make a joke. Now, again, if you're a good comedian and you want to make jokes about sensitive subjects that are not punching down, you can do so. It's just a very fragile tightrope to walk, and if you mess up, you miss, you might do something that you might regret. So, see, Holly Dinelady, Bill Maher always says something awful. Yeah. Only get if a free weekend. Yeah, that's how I used to watch a lot. Like, I would wait for the, HBO or Showtime or whatever free weekends, and then binge whatever I could, even before binging was a thing. But nowadays, like, we have HBO Max because my wife has an AT&T cell phone, and the right plan to have the AT&T cell phone to get us the free HBO plan, so I don't have to worry about the free trials for that. Of course, we subscribe to many other things that are not that we probably should hack. So I'm currently going through the process of my budget and trying to find the holes in the budget and get rid of as much as I can to make sure that everything's right for my checkbook. Let's see. Other comedians will borrow. That's not what Mara is doing. Let's see. I miss Ralphie May's comedy. Yeah, Ralphie May, is hysterical. I miss John Panette too. I went to a John Panette concert one time, and it was the most I've laughed, I think, at any sort of comedy thing that I've been to. It was just so freaking funny. I was wheezing laughing. I was laughing so hard. I don't even know if I want to talk about this other thing. I was laughing pretty hard the other day too with my kids. This has been a week where it's just, I've learned the things that I wouldn't expect to have been on my 2022 bingo card are on, like, I could mark off if they were on my bingo card, but I never expected them to be on my bingo card. For example, like, I think earlier in the week, I think over the weekend, I was being critical of Luke Campbell being the head rapper of Two Live Crew. He was making some comments about, what did certain people do for us, and we need to, and like, he was almost encouraging, like, not voting for, I guess, Democrats or whatever, because he thought that Democrats weren't doing enough for them, similar to like a Young Turks type thing. And I jumped in with everybody else and was criticizing the lead singer of Two Live Crew. Not something I thought I'd ever do. I never expected to be able to tune into Hal's show and hear about Alex Jones' penis size in comparison to his father. What? Like, that was not on my bucket list this year. And I was not on my bucket list to learn about 1,000 Years of Death from Naruto. It's something I found out via my kids, and apparently one of them did it to the other, and I had to basically tell them, that's not something you do, stop it. So that was not, as I was trying to be serious and explaining to my kids, look, that's not something you do to each other, just stop doing that. My wife's over there cracking up hysterically because the questions I'm asking about this whole thing that happened was just not, it was funny if you weren't the one trying to be the one disciplining the kids. But let's see. Lots of retracted messages that I've seen over this. I guess you type out something and you have a typo. That's fine. Let's see. Jill, bless you, Dan. Thank you very much. True, never seen to come across as sharp as Carlin. I mean, is anybody really as sharp as Carlin? I don't know. Carlin's pretty genius. Or was pretty genius. So anyway. So we got 10 minutes left. I think it's probably about that time where I could just go ahead and the show. There's no reason to chat endlessly. There's always next week. So again, ways to support the show. The best thing to do, subscribe to the show, like the videos, share any content that you find that you might like. Just peruse the videos if you want. Just follow me on Twitter, Liberal Dan Radio on Twitter, on TikTok, Facebook.com/LiberalDan. You got liberaldan.com, and that's the best ways to go ahead. And there's also the Anchor stream as well, but again, I haven't done much of that recently. Again, take the time. There is the Patreon if you want to support the show that way. I appreciate it, but the best thing right now you can do is just go ahead and subscribe and just spread the word that you enjoy Liberal Dan and other people might enjoy Liberal Dan as well. I'm just trying to find the clip that I'm looking for. I guess that's the problem with having too large of a sound bank, that you end up losing one of the clips that you're looking for. Anyway, yeah, thank you, Jolie. Appreciate it. That's the end of this week's episode of Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left. That's right. I will be back next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central. blogtalkradio.com/liberaldan or Liberal Dan Radio on YouTube. You can always watch or listen to old episodes, limited on YouTube for only the recent ones that I've done the show for. Otherwise, you can go and look up Liberal Dan on Spotify or whatever, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or whatever, and find me that way too. Until next week, this is Dan Zimmerman with Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left.